7:01 p.m. on Monday, September 28th, 2020. This is Tammy Lemmer, President of the Hazlet Board of Education, calling this evening's meeting to order. If everyone would please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we'll start with, is Secretary Wheeler on yet?
Yes, I'm here. I apologize. I had to switch from my computer to my phone, so something was going on with the laptop. Sorry.
No problem. Oh, shoot. Before we get to public correspondence, let me go ahead and do our roll call, just to confirm that we do have all of our board members present and that we have a quorum. Vice President Polverento.
Here.
Treasurer East.
Here.
Secretary Wheeler.
Here.
Trustee Maury.
Here.
Trustee Mashad.
Here.
Trustee Collins.
Here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, back to you, Secretary Wheeler.
Okay, for our public correspondence this evening, since our last school board meeting, we have received correspondence from Jenna McClendon with survey concerns and return to school, the return to school plan. Allison Gallegos contacted us regarding the survey and returning our return to school plan. We received email from Katie Quinn regarding the continuing learning plan and the consideration for our teachers. We received correspondence from Jeff and Jennifer Sweet regarding the survey for our district's continuing learning plan and safety concerns for students and staff in the event of a return to school hybrid situation. And we received correspondence from Jennifer Thompson, and it was a copy and paste of correspondence from a parent regarding general concerns for the virtual education. And
Great.
that will do it for correspondence.
The letter from the Sweets, I think they wanted that on the record. Can you go ahead and read that, please?
Oh, read the letter?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. I apologize. I wasn't prepared for that. Is it okay if I do it this way?
Sure.
I think I'm like not on camera now. Is that right?
That's correct, but you're okay.
Okay. Okay, I'm happy to read the letter from Jeff and Jennifer Sweet. Bear with me. Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Dear President Lemmer and members of the board, I am addressing this letter of concern to you with the request that this be included as part of the official board record. I would like to specifically address policy 0122, board powers, B, and the survey that was distributed to the parents in the Hazlet School District. As a parent who lives in the district, I received a request to fill out a survey. The survey was strongly encouraging parents to choose a hybrid learning option for their children, while threatening reduced learning for their children if they choose to continue the safety of online learning. The survey was strategically sent out after the first few weeks of school before children have had a chance to fall into a rhythm and at the highest stress point for those who are monitoring education at home. This timing most assuredly skewed parents to choose a hybrid schedule. a choice more likely made out of stress and frustration than safety. My question to you, the elected leaders who are charged with the safety of each and every one of the students in the Hazlet schools, is what has changed from 4 weeks ago. Has the COVID-19 community spread in the districts gone down? Is it because the buildings now have received occupancy and online learning was only happening because the buildings were not ready? Has the district come up with some innovative ways to keep the students and teachers safe while in your care? What groundbreaking safety measures are the district putting in place that other districts have not already tried? Will you require everyone to receive a COVID-19 test prior to returning to in-person learning? What are the quarantine policies? Will the classes be capped at a certain number? Is there enough room to socially distance the students? For increased safety, do you at least have N95 masks and more than the basic PPE for all the teachers and students? What about plexiglass between the teachers and students? What will happen when classes are inevitably quarantined? What about when teachers are quarantined or even worse, become ill? Teaching online is hard enough. How do you expect teachers to teach online and in person? How will the kids ever get into a routine with the constant change? Have you surveyed the teachers to find out how they feel? You have allowed a survey to be sent out asking parents to make a decision without giving us any information to make an informed decision. Online schooling is extremely difficult, but so is online school 3 days a week, or 2 days in person, 14 days quarantined, then online, etc. My children's teachers have been absolutely fantastic through this very difficult process. I would hate to see them get even more burned out by piling on even more learning options. I hope you have followed what is happening in other districts that have started with in-person learning. Quarantines after quarantines, even for those on hybrid schedules. Districts have moved to online from in-person in just 2 weeks of being opened, and those were in districts with a community spread of less than 3%. Ingham County is currently over 5%. St. Martha, a small private school nearby, just had an outbreak. I cannot even cite school data for our outbreaks in Ingham County because none of the public schools in our area are open for in-person learning. It goes without saying that our district is a few short miles from one of the biggest outbreaks in the state. I encourage you to talk to the superintendent in Pewamo Westphalia schools who moved from in-person learning to online in just 10 days after an outbreak. The painstaking steps they went through for student safety only to have a child in ICU with no pre-existing conditions in the second week of school, they thought they went above and beyond for safety and did everything right. Before you ask me to take the process off of you to make the hard decisions you have been elected to make, tell me what safety program you have put in place that is so much better than all these other districts that started in person and have already moved to online. Hazlet's preparedness and response plan looks just like every other district's cut and paste plan that have already failed. If you are saying it's safe for our students to return to the buildings, you better know it's safe. I understand that you and the administration have received a lot of pressure to open the schools for in-person learning. I do not understand how you can responsibly send a survey to parents when the parents have been given no new information. Trying to pass the decision for in-person learning onto parents is inappropriate. You are charged with the safety of the students in this district. As we are about to enter the second wave of this global pandemic, you alone have to own the consequences of your decision. Sincerely, Jennifer Sweet.
Thank you very much. So now we will go into the portion of the agenda for comments from the public. And As noted on the agenda, this is a meeting of the Board of Education for the purposes of conducting business of the district. It is not considered a public forum for interactive discussion. Each individual wishing to speak will be allowed up to 5 minutes for your comments. The board will listen and take comments and questions under advisement. Excuse me. Board members will not be responding to individual comments at this time. As presiding officer, I will refer questions to the superintendent for research and response as necessary. As we've done, for those of you who have been regulars on our Zoom meetings, we will open up the public comment through the raising your hand feature in the Zoom platform. And Mr. Casson will, excuse me, yes, Mr. Casson will unmute those individuals as I acknowledge them in the order of the comments that that are in the chat, or excuse me, in the participant list. For anybody who is called in this evening and does not have access to the chat feature, you are invited to send an email to the following address: webmaster, WEBMASTER, @hazlet.k12.mi.us. Mr. Casson will be monitoring that web email address, and he will read the corresponding comments or questions from those participants as well. So thank you, as always, for your engagement this evening. And I see we'll get started with our comments. I see a Christina Snyder with her hand up.
Hi, thank you. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Jennifer Sweet's letter hits the nail on the head in every single category. I'm a teacher in a different district that has decided to go fully face-to-face. I'm also a parent of 2 kids who are learning online. I can tell you from the perspective of a parent and a teacher that making the decision to go back face-to-face is not what you think it might be. It is not the panacea for parents, nor is it the panacea for the students, and it is absolutely unsustainable for the teachers. I can tell you a lot about it. It would take me a lot more than 5 minutes, but it hasn't worked well for us. As a parent, I understand the frustration of wanting your child to go to school in person and have those interactions with their peers. I understand the real, true, logistical nightmare of not having childcare. I just lived through that because I go to work every day and my kids stay home and learn online, so I get it. But when you send your kid to that school that has opened up with all the quote unquote safety measures in place, understand that you're basically being handed this present that's tied up in pretty paper, but the gift inside isn't what you're expecting. My students have not enjoyed being in the face-to-face environment. I feel like I'm managing a military academy classroom. My students hate wearing masks all day long. It is very dehydrating to be in a mask all day long as a teacher. As a teacher in a mask, it's not the same as other professions where you sit at a desk in a mask all day. Teachers present. They do basically the equivalent of public speaking all day long. It is exhausting. Furthermore, I am begging the board, if you are even considering asking your teachers to go back face-to-face, as well as simultaneously teaching online, you know, where they're in the classroom teaching their students who are there with them, while somehow also Zooming with their online kids, I am begging you to reconsider. Please do not do that to your teachers. It is cruel and it is not effective. My attention is divided all day long. I cannot give my in-person students my full attention. I cannot give my online students my full attention. Furthermore, I am trapped in one tiny little box all day long because I cannot leave the space where my camera is. It is the most horrific teaching experience of my life, and I will tell you that my first teaching experience was at a charter school in an inner city where a stray bullet went through a window. This is worse. And I'm not trying to use scare tactics. I want you to hear the reality. Please don't do that to your teachers. We can creative problem solve. There are kids that need the in-person interactions with their peers, and they need the in-person interactions with their teachers. But the answer is not to send everybody back, and the answer is not a hybrid plan where kids also are there online with their teachers. It's not the answer. We can do better, please. The last thing I want to say is this. We got to day 4 in my district before a teacher was carried off in an ambulance because he had overworked himself to the point that it was too much. Day 4. Every single day that I am teaching and that my peers are teaching, it feels like at least 3 days. It's not sustainable. Just really consider what I've said. I'm not trying to use scare tactics. I want you to understand what is asked of teachers when they go back face-to-face, and even worse when they go back face-to-face and also have to do the simultaneous online stuff. And parents need to also really think about what it means to, when your kids go back face-to-face, if it really is going to be what you think it's going to be. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I'll need the person to introduce themselves, but it's just showing up as iPhone.
Hi, I wonder if that might be me.
You sound, yes.
Okay, hi. My name is Mary Cook. My son Chance Cook is a senior at Hazlitt. As I recall from the last board meeting I attended, when we did the first survey, I believe 75% of parents indicated that they would prefer to have a hybrid process. I understand everything that was just said. However, I know I have a friend who teaches in Charlotte schools who are doing face-to-face. There have been no instances, no issues, and the kids are able to choose whether they want to, excuse me, whether they want to attend school or whether they'd like to do it online. I think that seems like a reasonable alternative. I know both of my kids would prefer to be back in school, even if it's a hybrid model. I just think it's important. My daughter has been, she doesn't drive, so she's been locked away at home, and it's affecting her. She needs to socialize. I think that we're ignoring that part of the benefit that our kids have from going to school. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Next, I'm showing Anthony Graybosch.
Can you hear me?
I can. Go right ahead, sir.
Good evening. So I've spoken at a couple of meetings about the science and wanted to talk this time about the ethics a little bit. The science is fairly clear. If you open the schools, you are creating an increase in the odds that members of the public will contract COVID, as well as an increase in the odds that students and staff will contract COVID, and that family members will contract COVID. And I mean, this is sort of mathematical fact, and there's no detail of treatment and no detail of the natural history of the virus that can change it. The easiest way to see it would be just feed the probabilities into a simple agent-based model, and you see it. And so this is worth mentioning because, one, to my knowledge, members of the community who don't have children at the school and from whom the vast majority of the tax money used to run the school is obtained have not really had a voice in this process. And so I think it's worth noting that the decision to base whether to open the schools on the survey would be the very opposite of giving people choices. It would be anti-democratically and deliberately and systematically ignoring the will and the interests of the citizens, the vast majority of whom the money from the school is obtained from. So, I mean, it would be the very opposite of democracy. So that said, in terms of ethics, one, I'd like to see the board publicly commit to having no consequences for any employee of the Hazlitt Public Schools, be they a teacher or a substitute or a staff member, paraprofessional of some sort, who decides that they do not want to teach in person. that person should be given the opportunity to do work similar to their current work while remaining online and without having to undertake the burden of physical risk, which was not like something that they signed up for when they decided to have a career in education or a career enabling in education. And you know, if you look at the backgrounds for people who teach in the schools, you sort of see, oh wow, you know, MBA, organized, kind of forceful. Bet they'd make twice as much money in like corporate, and instead they're in the school. I mean, are these people and people who, if we believe in the extreme value of in-person learning, people who've helped kids for many years, are these people who we want to see sort of take one for the team now that there's an issue? I would say probably not. The second thing, online school, you know, the sort of unique point that was raised by the physicians who supported creating the public health risk of reopening schools for in-person learning. The unique point that was made by those folks that had any sense was that maybe there are some kids who will undergo, who will face depression in the event that they don't have in-person school. There's a famous television show where some folks are trapped in a cave, and after 15 minutes, they decide that cannibalism is necessary for their survival. The joke being it shouldn't take such a short period of time. And I would say, you know, you look at online education, there are people who do it very well. There are companies that do it very well to the point because you save time. You lose a lot of interaction that doesn't really have anything to do with learning academic content, or learning the ability to think critically or reason mathematically. And so I think it would be worth of making sure that you avoid a false choice where you say, oh, online education is so bad, we need to like create a public health hazard using tax money, and then lie to ourselves about how when we do that, we're like preserving like people's freedom. Rather than do that, like, you know, take the go through the trouble of making sure that you're making the online experience as good as possible, and not creating a false choice, which sort of raises questions. Next,
We have about 30 seconds.
okay, HIPAA. If someone gets sick, well, you know, if a kid disagrees with their parents' the judgment, my mom and dad want me to go to school, I think they're nuts, but here I am. How do you deal with it? Again, it's a taxpayer-funded entity. It would be one thing if we were a private school system, but to use money from the public to create a hazard for the public, I just can't think of anything that's more obviously wrong. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, sir. I'm showing next Jason Kilday.
Thank you. I appreciate the time again. First thing I would like to, address is the letter that was read at the start of the board meeting here tonight. I think we have to be very cautious about putting things on record that are opinion-based and not necessarily fact-based. I'm not saying that the Sweets didn't have facts in there, but you're towing a dangerous line when you are able to read one letter, because they requested it, versus many others that may have just as important opinions and or facts. So I understand that any of us can make that request. I would caution against it if it's opinion over fact. In regards to the other school district that apparently had an issue when it opened, I think we can find several examples of school districts that haven't had issues when they've opened face-to-face instruction. I know I have friends and family in other school districts where a hybrid approach is working, and outbreak has been limited to almost nothing. Some are in full 5-day face-to-face classrooms where that they are not seeing spikes and they're not seeing issues. So I think for everyone that has an opinion on either side of this fence, we can come up with whatever data we want to show why our opinion is right. But at the end of the day, what we're really seeing in this community right now is an increase in positive cases. We're not seeing an increase in mortality and hospitalizations. And if we keep that as a science and data of how we're going to move forward, I think we're all going to be a lot better off. So what is in front of the board tonight is a leadership opportunity, in my opinion. for both the administration, Mr. Cook, Ms. Jillings, and the rest of the board, we have asked you as a community to be leaders for our kids in our community. And so with that, I am strongly urging you to be leaders and not be complacent and not do what the rest of the school districts around us are doing. Use facts, use what the community is telling you they want, which per our last survey was a majority of parents wanted their kids in some sort of face-to-face communication. And last but certainly not least, I would ask if the board and the administration staff is engaging the teacher community, specifically that of Hazlet. What has the engagement been with teachers, whether it be subcommittees, and understanding the approach that you're about to present tonight? How does that work in reality with what they have to do in their day-to-day classroom and preparation? Because at the end, we're going to be relying heavily on the teachers to execute whatever plan the rest of you came up with. And if they have not been a part of this process, then it's already in a tough position from the get-go. As always, my family and I appreciate everyone at Hazlet Public Schools has done, as well as the board, to work through this pandemic. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, sir. I've got a Jennifer Hanna next.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Hanna. I'm a registered nurse, but I have not been working for the past 5 years. I quit to stay home with my daughters, but I have been on the Ingham County Health Center's Board of Directors for 4 years. And I've worked closely with Linda Vale, who heads the Ingham County Health Department. And while this is a very difficult situation, I want to acknowledge that there is no good option at this point. There's certainly downsides to any form of learning that we do at this point, but in medicine, we have a saying, first, do no harm. We have to keep in mind the health and safety of our students, our teachers, and their families. We need to remember that while our students may get sick and not be terribly sick, or their teachers, they may be okay, but they could pass it on to people who will not be okay. This is a new disease and the science is still evolving around it. We are starting to see treatments, but we still don't have the golden bullet as far as I'm concerned. And we also have to remember that a lot of people who get sick, who may not even require hospitalization, will suffer long-term effects from this. I have a friend who got COVID back when it first hit Michigan. He was a prolific writer, an actor, a journalist. He is not able to type. He sat down to type up a letter, looked up after 5 minutes and said the screen was a jumble of letters. He is no longer able to work. His life is ruined because of this. He's still alive, but his life is ruined. For our students, we need to keep in mind many factors. Yes, socialization is important, but that is not the school's primary function. Also, neither is childcare the school's primary function. We also need to keep in mind the psychological effects of switching back and forth. I think it would be harder, frankly, on my children to return face-to-face for a brief period of time, only to have to go back to virtual learning. There's also the psychological effects of worrying about getting sick. There's also the psychological effect of worrying about getting somebody else sick. And I can tell you firsthand that as a child, watching a loved one die will stay with you for the rest of your life. If we do return to school face-to-face, I implore you to do it in such a manner that you take care of those who are most vulnerable first. I'm a stay-at-home mom. My kids don't need to go back. They can stay at home. We need to get those vulnerable kids in first. As far as the teacher goes, remember, we're asking them, if they're face-to-face, to put their lives, their children's lives, their family lives, their friends' lives at risk. It's also unfair, I think, to ask teachers to teach two different ways. I can't imagine trying to teach face-to-face and online at the same time. I think that's completely unreasonable and does a disservice to everyone. I also worry about the conditions of the school. I've heard that there is still construction ongoing and that some of the classrooms are not expected to have sinks until November. Hand sanitizer is good, but anytime your hands are visibly soiled, you need to wash them with soap and water. We also need to make sure our teachers have time to get their classrooms ready. I've talked to teachers and I understand that they are putting in an extraordinary amount of work outside their normal time frame. And on that note, I want to say thank you to all the Hazlitt teachers who have worked so hard and care so much through their students throughout this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Tanya Lurch.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Barely.
Oh, okay. Now how about that? Am I louder? Okay. Hi, Sonia Lurch. I work at Rowlia, and we do have sinks in all the rooms. So just to answer that question. So we have had some kids, quite a few kids in our building the last couple weeks, and it has been going well. I think I've talked before, and everyone probably knows I am a big advocate for trying to get small groups of kids back in school. We hear from many parents that it's not going as well for their child, and I think we can do it. Hazlitt has never, ever stepped away from a challenge. We have always gone far beyond to do the right thing, and we've done it well. And we don't just fall into, we don't take the easy way out. We don't just look at other models and say, yep, we're going to do that. So I challenge you, the board, Steve, Susan, all of our administrators, to figure out a way that teachers don't have to teach both ways. So they do not have to teach virtual and in person. I think we can do it. I've thought long and hard about it. I really think there's a way, and I bet you've already come up with something. So I can't wait to hear what it is. I know you care about our teachers, and I care about our teachers, and I care about our students, and I think we can do it. I know we can do it, and I know the teachers are willing to work. Maybe not everybody wants to come back, and there's a way to figure that out. Who wants to teach virtual? Who wants to teach in person? We can do it. Our schools are, if they're not 100% ready, they will be ready. They look great. So I'm excited that the kids have been in school. It looks a lot more like school, and the smiles underneath their masks are amazing. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next, I'm showing Jen Thompson, as opposed to Heather Thompson. Hi, Jen.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So my name is Jen Thompson. I'm a proud resident of Hazlitt School District for well over 17 and a half years now. Parent of one class of 2018 graduate, currently a junior at Michigan State University, along with two current Hazlitt Public School students, a sophomore and senior at the high school. First of all, before I begin, I want to thank our educators and administrators who have done everything in their power to bring confidence and normalcy to our students in these strange days. And I'd especially like to thank those of you who've gone against popular opinion and pushed our district towards being a leader in bringing our students back safely to in-person learning. With that, I want to be clear that I've not done my part in speaking up for my students, and I should have, and neither has my husband. Of course, we filled out the surveys and we were confident that our district was going to begin the school year as a standalone leader. However, we were wrong in making that assumption. We didn't do anything more but sit back, complain some, and find a way to get our two high school students in the right mindset to carry on despite their voices not being heard either. At this point, we've grown quite frustrated. It has become obvious that not only are we not being heard, rather the majority of our community is not even being acknowledged. The same community that elected you to represent our voices, that voted for renewed bond dollars to bring restoration to our school facilities, and furthermore trusted you to use those monies wisely and to hold those accountable to their commitment and contract with Hazlitt Public Schools. Our concerns have grown from simple frustrations that we have no choice in the manner in which our children are being educated, to more complex frustrations that there may be more to this online choice than meets the eye. Our buildings are a mess, clearly not conducive to hold in-person class due to continued delays in construction. We feel this is another failure in accountability. We need answers and transparency. What is truly at the core of these decisions being made? Are you honoring and exercising our A+ brand? Are you seeking to be a leader or simply following suit of neighboring districts? What is our target date for return to in-person learning? We've been told October 12th, which is just 2 weeks away. Are we ready? Is pressure being placed on Clark Construction to complete the project in a timely manner? When was the last bond update communicated to our district community? Not much can be found on the website, and the last Facebook update was posted over 2 years ago. This lack in communication is beyond unacceptable to those who voted in support of this renewal. Moving on, while you continue to talk things over and discount the survey results, you are failing our future. If you truly believe in the mission of Hazlet Public Schools, which states to provide educational opportunities which enable students of all aspirations and abilities to grow and learn, you will do just that. You will make a way, and you will stop the behind closed door conversations and excuses protecting the minority. You will have an action plan that starts our students back to in-person learning ASAP. For those that prefer an online option, there's a way to provide that as well. In fact, there are many ways to make all of this happen. HPS needs to stop researching the many ways and what everyone else is doing and simply make it happen for Hazlet. It's not going to be perfect. It will require transformation along the way, and that is a-okay. On a personal note, my husband and I are working longer, more challenging hours in our own professions in order to achieve the same outcomes pre-COVID, and I know we're not alone. We did not sign up for this setup either. Every single industry has had to pivot in order to move on, and that those that have not have fallen short, some even closing their doors or losing patrons to other businesses moving on. We've worked through pandemic without ceasing. We've had to rely on ingenuity and creative out-of-the-box ways to keep on, and we have never been stronger. Of course, it's been exhausting, but it has also been rewarding to take a step back and say, hey, look at us, we are leading the way. What an awesome example for others to follow. So I ask you, what is stopping our district from leading the way in our state within your industry of education? Early on, my leadership took surveys and put out weekly, if not daily communications, asking us to get on board or move on. The communication was strong and on point. I'm so proud of my organization and wish I was proud of my school district in the same way. I would love to see that A+ actually means something beyond a red scripted letter on our signs and website, and that our students could share with friends and family across the state and nation about the pride they have with their school. Instead, they are being failed. They are the ones sitting at home while others are back to in-person learning. I have no clue what has been passed along over recent weeks, as I've already shared much of this. So my apologies if being redundant here, but I will leave you with this. Thank goodness for sports. Thank goodness sports at least have been reinstated. That's the only place we have seen our youngest mentally stable since March. Let me say that again. The only place we have seen his spirit alive and well. And our senior daughter, you might ask? Well, we've had to encourage her through tears to throw all expectations of what a senior year should look like out the window. We have challenged her to find ways to bring joy and hope back to her fellow classmates and friends.
I'm sorry, you're at the end of your time.
I'm almost done. Our students are even finding ways to make life happen right now, guys. It can be done in a safe manner. We have to put in the work, hold each other accountable, and make it happen. It's not just about socialization.
Thank
it's
you.
about the whole student.
We've reached your 5 minutes.
I will send the rest.
I have to cut you off. I'm sorry. You've reached your 5 minutes. But please feel free to follow up with any additional points. Next, and I feels bad. I'm sorry to have to do that to anybody. Next person is Rachel Sestak. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now. Thank you.
I had a couple comments and questions. For the people that are talking about that children will get sick and our numbers are low and it's going to happen and that's just how this is going to play out. I want to know who gets to choose which child gets sick. This is a ludicrous argument to me. Are you saying it's okay if my child dies? I keep hearing this repeated over and over by medical professionals that choose to speak up, by other parents. I don't know how you get to pick and just say, some kids, some teachers, some staff, they're gonna get sick. Maybe it's only 1 in 1,000. So maybe that's only 3 in Hazlet. Only 3 people in Hazlet are gonna die, so let's send them back to school. That's all I really have to say about that part. It's just such an inconsiderate, ridiculous comment to me. I just have a lot of trouble moving past that. I'm curious about why hybrid is going to be a better option from going from 4 days of live learning to going to 2 days of live learning with 3 days of asynchronous learning. Not sure how that is going to benefit my child. Curious also about what's going on with the buildings, as people have talked about. I think that transparency is key. I don't want to have the facts completely circumvented to me every time that I'm listening to a board meeting or I'm trying to speak to someone about this stuff. I think that as parents in the community, we just really want to know that our voices are being heard, and I don't think that we feel that way. I think, or my last question is just that I want to know about teachers, and are they being included in any of these conversations? I know that it's consistently said that yes, there are groups from each building that are being included in all of this, but when speaking to the teachers at the different buildings, it doesn't seem that they have the same view as the board is putting out at board meetings. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I'm not sure if it's Chip or Katie Tant or both perhaps.
Hi, it's Chip. I'm gonna try to speak briefly. I think there's a couple points that are getting overlooked in people's comments here, and I won't behoove the point. One is, I don't think any school district currently, and certainly not Hazlet's plan, is to tell people what's right for their kids. Now, if Hazlet's gonna make kids go back to school, send the police out to make them go to school in face-to-face, well, then I think we have an issue. But that's not what you're gonna do. So the argument that somebody can't choose what's safe or appropriate for them is kind of ludicrous. And the governor of our state, in all her caution, is opening up trampoline parks, okay, and gymnasiums and stuff on the 10th of October, I think, the 9th. So if you can open up a trampoline park with unprofessional staff who works there to clean, with sets of rules, and they think that that's an acceptable risk, how can we not get the kids back in school somehow or some way? There's a lot of pontificating here about who's gonna die and who's not, and whatever. And I'm gonna say this from the heart, I did the eulogy of a Hazlet Public Schools 8th grader 4 years ago who killed himself. What about the mental health of that person? What about the mental health of the kids that are out there sitting at home faltering? What about the kids who don't have support and stay-at-home parents at home? What about the kids who don't have a decent meal to eat or a clean sink to wash their hands in at home? The school provides all kinds of resources that go beyond math and history classes and books. And my heart's pounding now thinking back about that day in October, because it was awful. And I never want anybody to have to do something like that. But life goes on, and we've all got to accept the risk that's out there. People are going to work, people are going to Home Depot, people are going to Taco Bell. People are sitting around in parks, they're sitting around in bars, be it spread out a little bit. People can pick what's okay for them and what's not. But ultimately, there's tons of kids back to school. DeWitt's going back to school, St. John's is in school, Howell's in school. These school districts have figured it out. And I can't believe that anybody thinks that they're any cleaner or any smarter or anything else than anybody else in Hazlet. That's ludicrous, okay? Their kids aren't any healthier. There's no way, okay? They're just going at it from a different angle. But I think this is so wrong for the health of the kids. Our 7th grader, he's never sad about anything. He hates being home. He hates online school. He acts out. He cries. He says he hates school altogether. He doesn't hate school. He just hates the school that he has right now because it's frustrating, it's challenging, it's not like the school that he used to have. And billions of kids feel like that. But like, I just can't understand how people can say, oh, you know, who's gonna die? Well, I mean, did you take your kid to the grocery store with you? Did they go to Target? Because if they did, they're far more likely to get COVID in Target than they are in a well-controlled school. It just doesn't make sense. Everyone, please try to just take a step back from the hysteria and the panic. Look at the whole like book of business, life, and what's going on in the community, what the government and the governor and all the people say is okay. And can we try to move forward, please, just a little bit? I think we owe it to our children to try to be leaders for them and find them outlets. If not, they're all going to be in the trampoline park. And if you think that's a good, clean place to be, I think that Sonia and the people at Raleigh can do a hell of a lot better.
Thank you very much. I'm showing Jeff's iPad is next. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, thanks for hearing from me. I'm Jeff Smith. I retired this past year from the high school, Hazlitt High School. I'll try not to speak too long. I wrote a lengthy letter back in August and my views haven't changed. The numbers aren't any better and we're heading into the cold and flu season. I think some of the comments we've heard then and certainly some we've heard tonight are ludicrous. Certainly everyone works in good faith, and in the schools, I know firsthand working inside the school district for the better part of my career, just how committed all the professionals are, and God bless them for what they do every day. The schools aren't designed for social distancing. Even with the renovations, you have the same square footage. Some of these comments are absurd. A well-controlled, clean environment, we can clean those halls all we want. If you're packing 700 to 800 students through those halls passing or in the classrooms of 20 to 30 students, there's this inherent risk there. The nature of in-person schooling is a social exercise. And if we're instituting the safety precautions we need to institute, you don't have much of that. For some of these people talking about other districts, I know a lot of people in other districts. If the NIT school board meeting, if it would be helpful for me to log what I've talked to with other professionals in other buildings and other districts and the hardships their teachers report and their students report that go face-to-face or hybrid, it's off the charts. I think we heard from a teacher at the very beginning of this meeting that shared what it is largely like in schools that are going back in person. Hazlitt's not magical. We aren't going to avoid the same pitfalls as everyone else because there's no smarter way to enlarge our classrooms. There's no smarter way to double our staff with the budget we have to provide online instruction that's equitable for those kids that choose it, and then for the students that choose a hybrid. We need to be dedicated one way or another so the staff can fairly apply their talents to the students' needs. Right now, that's an online environment. Going back to what Jen Hanna said earlier, first, do no harm. We can do no harm teaching online. If we dedicate ourselves to that, with the administrators and the staff that we have, the teachers we have, the parapros we have, we can be effective at that, and then maybe allow for other students who need that in person on a much more smaller basis to come in and do it. Looking at the survey options we had recently, I'm very concerned with the options that were put in front of me. Being on the outside these days, I'm sure there's a lot more to it, and I look forward to hearing from that from the board. But for our daughter, we've got 3 graduates of Hazlitt Public Schools. Our daughter is a junior. It certainly can be challenging. It's not the same as it used to be, but if she goes back in person, it's not going to be the same it used to be. It's effective. Her teachers are working their tail off. They're doing a great job. She is learning. Yes, it's not the same, but it's safe. And when I look at the plan, at least the sketch that was drawn up and put in the survey, I'm very concerned that there's a loss of learning and face-to-face that takes place for those that actually choose the hybrid in person. But I'm certainly concerned with what I saw for the online. That seemed very suspect and questionable. And if we were to choose the online version, it kind of sounds like they're going to be pumped out to videos and kind of left on the sidelines. I'm sure that's not the case, but I can tell you in talking to parents, that's what it looks like when you look at the survey. And then to choose the in-person, I hate to choose the unsafer of the two options simply because there's more contact, but it also seems like there's going to be less contact there than there is in the virtual environment now. So I'm looking forward to the meeting tonight. I'm very curious to hear about the construction updates. I'm very curious to hear more about the plans moving forward. I know the administrators and teachers are working their tails off towards this. I just fear there's no good answers. In light of no good answers and possible dangers, that you do no harm first and you pick the safer course of action. We can still be effective online. I have ultimate faith in our teachers and staff to be able to deliver that. So thanks once again for listening to me and hearing my views.
Thank you very much. I'm showing next, we have a Melissa. Melissa, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, this is Melissa Rosenberg. I spoke at some of the other meetings. I did send you an email this afternoon, Ms. Lemmer, and I appreciate your prompt response. I spoke at the previous meetings. I'll be short today. I am a pediatric infectious disease physician. Many of you have heard me talk before, and I don't want to belabor my points. I just want to highlight a couple concerns that I have. And I thank Mr. Smith for his comments, and Jen Hanna, who I know really well as well. A couple comments that I am concerned about, and I did voice them in my email. First is that I am very concerned about the timing of this possible return to school. I know I'm an unpopular opinion today, but I really, quite frankly, don't care. I do not feel it's a safe time for us to be even contemplating going back to school, given the start of flu season. Some of you have briefly mentioned it. Flu season is upon us, and the symptoms of COVID and flu, many of them do overlap. And if you people don't think that children get sick or die from this disease, you are flat out wrong. I just took care of a COVID patient a few weeks ago who went back to face-to-face school and was borderline almost intubated. So it happens. I've seen it happen. I've heard it happen. I just want to say that that is a false remark. Regarding the comments about the governor opening up trampoline parks, I completely disagree with her opening up trampoline parks, and I don't take my kids to Target, but obviously that's personal choice, and that's up to the people of this community. I am concerned about the fact that the survey that we received said that our two options were either in person, hybrid, or we could choose virtual, and that virtual option was basically that we have to be almost completely asynchronous. The wording, I believe, said very little live learning. I think my children have been fortunate, and I realize that we have worked our work schedules around them. We are both physicians. We have been working very hard, both in our professions, where we get our temperatures taken daily, wear a mask all day long, and also being home with our kids to try and facilitate virtual learning. I realize we have the means to do that, and I realize that that is wonderful for me, and I realize that some children don't have that, and I am sorry that that is the case, and I wish that I could change that. But I am concerned that the children who are going to choose to go, the parents who are going to choose for their children to go completely virtual are going to be left with completely asynchronous learning. And that is a huge concern I have. We are also fortunate that both of my children have very good teachers this year. Like all the teachers in Hazlet are wonderful. And we certainly are enjoying having the live learning with those teachers this year. If this district is going to choose to go back hybrid, and I choose to keep my children virtual, and you are telling me that that means that my children are going to have asynchronous learning, I will pull my children from this district. I do not know what the other parents' belief are, and I certainly know that it is personal choice, but I would like you to think not only about the fact that that is going to leave a lot of children with no face-to-face contact. I would also like you to think about what that is going to do to our teachers. I would like you to think strongly about what is going to happen come flu season, when any child who enters that building with cough, cold symptoms, and a fever is going to have to be tested and quarantined, and that whole class will have to be as well. And the facilities and the management to do that, the logistics are going to be a nightmare. Please consider that in making your choice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, I'm showing Brian Town.
Thank you very much, Tammy. Hi, everyone. This is Brian. First of all, I want to say thank you to the board and all our educators. Through this, there is no good answer. I couldn't agree more. I think any answer or any plan that any of us would have came up with would have been not perfect. And so I understand that. I was an educator for 17 years. I was an educator in the Hazlet Public School System for 13 years. And those of you that know me know that I would be in-person learning and doing whatever I could to make sure that kids could come back safely to school. That being said, the online learning environment that my son Jack is doing right now is not working. It is not effective. And it's just not good for him to be sitting on his computer all day long. Like Jen said, thank goodness for football. Otherwise, I don't know if that kid would make it through this. He's a good kid. He's a strong kid, but this has really been wearing on him and all of his friends. We did have a kindergartner in Hazlet Public Schools and loved everything about Wilkshire. I've had 4 children go through Wilkshire. I think it's one of the best schools in the country. But unfortunately, due to the board not listening to the survey that 70% of the parents put out, we pulled our daughter from Hazlet Public Schools. Neither one of us, we both work full-time. I run a business and my wife's a PA. We don't have the luxury of having somebody stay home and help them on their computer. If we didn't get into the Montessori school that we got into, we would have pulled her and homeschooled her at that point, because staring at an iPad's not how we want to raise our daughter. You know, the other thing that really concerns me is that we have some amazing people at Hazlet schools. And we, as a business owner, I had to pull 12 of my employees aside in March and say, we got to do things differently. And we figured it out. And I've been into 20 manufacturing plants in the last 3 months that have over 1,000 people working. If they can do it, we can do it at Hazlet Public Schools. My wife is a PA. She's been back at work now almost since the beginning of this. She wears a mask every day and she sees 30 patients, 40 patients a day, and everything is just fine. Our daughter, who goes to a large Montessori school with 60, 70 students in it, they wear a mask every day. She's been going there for 35 days, 36 days, and they haven't had a single incident. Everybody wears a mask and it's not fun, and she comes home excited and brighter than ever. I'm so thankful that I didn't have to look in her eyes and see after an all-day Zoom class. We can do this. Hazlet schools can do this. I know all of the administrators there. I know majority of the teachers there, and they need to get back to work and they need to do their job in person. The online high school is not working. It's a disaster. And honestly, some of the kids think it's a joke. I really don't know how they're getting through it. Jack said he may have to fail art class. And it's just a sad state. I think that it can be done, and I know that we have the people there to do it. And especially at Wilkshire, I mean, that's probably one of the best staffs in the world. So I implore you guys to make the decision based on what the majority of the parents want, and the majority of the parents are willing to support. And lastly, the communication piece has been pretty poor. When we went on lockdown at my company, we had daily Zoom meetings every single day, just because. We haven't changed that, because right now everybody's depressed and it's hard, and we're not out of this, so we have daily meetings. Some of the biggest manufacturing plants in Michigan have communication plans with their staff that are amazing. We need to be doing a better job at communicating to our parents and not just having Zoom board meetings. Right now, we're just kind of at the mercy of the board, which is unfortunate. So with that, thank you again. I know there's no good answer, but we want our kids back in school yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm showing what says Waters M1. So if you could introduce yourself, please, and welcome.
Hi, my name is Nicole Waters, and I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I just want to share that in the beginning, I was a heavy proponent of face-to-face. At this point in time, I don't know how I feel. I was very confused by the survey, and I didn't think either one of the options presented were a good option. So I sat down with my son, who's a junior at the high school. He didn't like either one of the options and didn't quite understand what they would mean. And his response to me was, just keep it the same way until we can all go back to school like normal. So there was no option to say that, so I'll say it here. There is no good answer, and I feel bad for the community because it's splitting us. I will say that having football is the only thing that is keeping the school year, what's the right word? It's not even normal. Bearable, perhaps. Keeping the school year bearable. At least my son gets out of the house and has something to do. My concern with going face-to-face or doing the hybrid model is that if one person contracts COVID, that we shut down everything. We can't do sports, we can't be in school, and we're back to like how we felt in March. And then the downside of staying home is that we're home all day long, we're sitting on a computer, we have no interaction. There is no good answer other than keeping kids somewhat engaged and allowing them to do sports as safely as possible, because that's the one thing that keeps people moving. So I don't know what the answer is. I know for my son, it seems to be going well online. He seems to be engaged and doing okay. I am not able to help him. I'm not equipped to help him in any of the classes that he's in at this point. So I'm not thrilled about either option because both options seem to have less time with the teacher and more time that he has to try to learn something on his own. So those are my concerns. Either choice as presented, I don't think is a good choice. But my concern going hybrid is that if one person catches it, then we have inconsistency and we have to stop sports. So that's just in, and I wish you luck in trying to find a good compromise. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person I'm showing, it's listed as Jenna Mack.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, my name is Jenna McClendon. I have a student at Murphy and a student at Wilkshire. And I sent emails last week to all the board and the superintendent and the associate superintendent. And I want to thank Associate Superintendent Gillings and President Lemmer for getting back to me on those. I'm not going to rehash all the points that I made in there. You can read it at your leisure, but I did want to update one thing that I discussed. The state is including a new reporting on their website about school-related outbreaks. It's only been up for 15 days, and there's 78 total cases listed, and of those cases, 46 have happened in K-12 buildings, which is more than half the cases. Just, you know, from a number standpoint, one has had two in Ingham County, two in Ingham County, one at Weberville High School, and then St. Martha's Elementary in Okemos. So the people that have, you know, been saying, oh, it's fine and it's been working, I mean, the numbers prove that these are cases that are occurring on school grounds during school hours. And then I just, you know, would like to raise the point that if the option presented on the survey of teachers who have been working tirelessly and doing so much and learning new technology and making amazing things happen for our students, I would venture a guess that it is not within our budget to double their salaries. So if we ask them to do 2 jobs of teaching live in-person students and then also recording those same lessons that they've just taught live for the students that remain virtual for them to watch as videos later, we should probably take into consideration that they're not really really getting compensated for that. And I'm not entirely sure that asking our educators who have done so much work and worked so hard to take on an entire another job is where we want to be and the thing that we want to do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, I have an Alicia's iPhone.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can, if you could introduce yourself, please.
My name is Alicia Deshevsky. I have an 8th grader at the middle school, Daniel. I just wanted to just touch about a few things here. First of all, I think the teachers are doing an outstanding job with virtual learning. My son is doing extraordinary right now, and he usually struggles in school. So I have nothing but good things to say. I think it should continue until we can get back into a classroom normally. If it's not safe for our 7 board members to meet in a boardroom together, it's certainly not safe for our kids to be back in the classroom with the teachers. That's about it. Thank you for giving me the time to speak tonight.
Thank you very much. All right, I am not showing anybody queued up at the moment. Mr. Casson, did we have anybody submit comments to the website or to the email, excuse me?
No, we don't have any comments to the email address.
Okay, I've got one more name, Michelle Brock.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Welcome, thank you. I would just, again, I know we keep saying it, but I cannot thank our teachers enough for the hard work that is being done. And although not perfect or preferable for them, let alone the students, I think I'm grateful for the 7 days of work that they're putting in away from their families to help support mine, and also to the board members and administration. One point I would like to make is, I've heard it said before, but I think increased communication would help. And although we certainly receive communication from our teachers and from our schools, having children in 2 different schools, I know that all the sites have that. I think hearing some more maybe school updates that talk about some of these items that feel a little mysterious, like the decision to what prompted the second survey was a bit of a mystery. I've been actively involved with other families that have children with IEPs and or 504s. And we have a new director of special education in our district. And I think it would be helpful for communication about that new role for families that may be unfamiliar with that change. And that has some pretty significant implications because there's much planning underway for those children and those families to receive some supplemental supports because the disparity is already so great for students with disabilities. Having a child that can't mute or unmute, doesn't have the ability to mute or unmute, presents a different challenge. I heard another person talk about concerns about vulnerable children. And I think if we were going to focus on the great need, while there is clearly going to be ongoing mental health issues throughout the entire COVID crisis at an international level, I think that those learning disparities are within the purview of the school to be able to support. And I know that my children are undergoing assessments as is happening throughout the district, that some of those children can be identified and we might be able to find opportunities for them to learn in some more supplemental in-person ways. So if there were to be a consideration, I am not in favor of returning to in-person learning until the science dictates that we're safe enough to do so. So I would just like to reiterate, I think communication is critical. Ongoing transparency would continue to be appreciated. and also an active involvement or at least in that communication, how the staff and faculty of this district are being involved in these decisions. And as much as I appreciate that my voice is heard, I think it takes all of us. And then finally, I know that for the amazing teachers that my daughter has, my daughter with a disability, that the number of balls that the teachers are juggling to provide in-person learning for some students and also provide learning supports in a learning lab for my daughter in person takes a great deal of effort. And so I just implore the community to really think about, or at least the district to consider adding in as many people to support writing curriculum and developing lessons to help the teachers do the work that they're doing. So again, communication, focusing on the most vulnerable students, and I appreciate your efforts so much.
Thank you very much. And just to reiterate for folks who've come on late, we are in public comment period. It's an opportunity for the public to share their comments, and board takes that information under advisement and or forwards it on for additional action. Each individual gets up to 5 minutes, and for those who are on the phone, do not have access to the internet, the Zoom raise hand feature, which is how we're identifying people and calling on people. You're invited to send your comments or questions to webmaster@hazlitt.k12.mi.us. I'm showing Daria Lefebvre is next up.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes. Hi, thank you so much. My son is in 2nd grade at Raleigh, and I want to start by acknowledging the hard work of the staff at Raleigh, who have truly exceeded all my expectations in terms of adjusting to this nightmare as we started the school year. I have been an online professor for 16 years, so I teach on a higher education level. I teach undergrad and grad students. So this online teaching and learning is not new to me by any means, but it is a very different reality for me as a mom, as a parent. So I'm used to teaching students who choose online learning, not who are thrown in the online environment due to the pandemic. So there's a big difference between having to do something and wanting to do something. And my 7-year-old always says to me, do I have to do this, or do you want me to do this? So he kind of is quite insightful in those questions. I'm a parent of a child with special needs. My child thrives best in the social environment where he can learn from his peers and from his teachers, where he has the routine, where he understands the rules and expectations. He struggles with testing because it's scary and it's confusing and it's overwhelming to him. He doesn't want to do math. He doesn't want to read for 20 minutes, but I strongly believe that he does not want to do all these things because he's alone and he's learning, and because he's not with his peers to do this. He is very social. And with all that said, I want to be very clear that I am not advocating for us to go back to school face-to-face. Do we want him to go back to school? Yes, absolutely, we do. Do we want him to walk in the classroom and see his amazing teacher that he has, who has gone above and beyond what I could imagine or expect to make this transition for school smooth? Yes, we do. We absolutely do. Every morning I sit and I listen to the Zoom morning meetings, and my heart is just overflowing with admiration and love that I feel for this incredible person who goes above and beyond the call of duty to make every single child in the classroom feel special and welcomed and cared for. And yet in no way do I ever want to put her in the position of having to teach face-to-face and hybrid and online students all at once, and to be threatened with this disease. It's not fair, it's not considerate, and it's not human. And as a parent, I want to send my kid to school so that he can learn. But as a human being, I know that it's not fair for me to breathe that sigh of relief at knowing that he's at school and learning, knowing that that size built on the overworked teachers who are struggling to keep their own lives together and who have to teach under these terrible, strenuous conditions. Another thing that worries me more than committing to a specific form of instruction is making a move and then having to step back. And if we decide to go to school and welcome the kids back and then spend a week or two in the classroom and get used to the routine and then have an outbreak and then have to go back to virtual learning, I really think it's going to create an even stronger and bigger disarray. So let's not forget that our children strive on routines and on knowing what to expect. And as parents, we need those schedules and routines as well, because we do have jobs that we don't always allow us to have that flexibility. So this teeter-totter is really not healthy for anyone. So with that, I am going to make a suggestion that may not be the most popular one, but it is one that I feel like it would be most realistic and most considerate of as many people involved as possible. And I'm saying this with a heavy heart. I do not want this to happen. I want to be very clear about this. But I am willing to accept that COVID is winning right now, and then it would be the smartest thing for us to do is to stay online for the remainder of the calendar year. And again, this is not what I want. It's not what is ideal for my family or for my son, but it is something that I honestly and truly believe would be the most considerate of those who are tasked with educating my child and who are tasked with my son's safety. It's not what I want as a parent, but it is what I believe is best as a human being. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Aaron Irving. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hi, Aaron Irving here. First of all, I do want to thank the teachers. My daughter is in Wilkeshire in the Button Room, and our teachers are doing a great job. I was hesitant to think it was going to be great online, but I think she's doing pretty good. That being said, some of the things I think that I haven't heard yet, at least for the lower level, is how do you expect, without having 5 to 6 helpers in a room, to have those kids keep that room clean? And I mean, I got a 5-year-old, and within 2 hours, she's probably stuck her hand in her mouth a few different times. So within 20 minutes, I'd expect that room to not be sanitized and in danger. I've also heard people say, well, we know the risk and we can take it. We don't know the risks because I know what I'm doing, but I don't know what all the other children are doing, and I don't know what all the other parents are doing. There's parents who want to go and eat and be in tons of indoor places, and there's parents who don't. So I can't even make an informed decision because I don't know what the other parents are doing. And then I also heard something about, needing socialization and the exercise. I fear that they're going to get less exercise because realistically, how are you going to allow 50 to 60 kids outside playing without some kind of supervision that's going to not allow them to interact as well as they could have anyways, where at my house, she can go out and play in her playground and get all the exercise she needs and not be told she can't do this or can't do that, right? And then we look out in the public. Well, I mean, there's already been numerous articles where parents have sent their kids to school knowing they had COVID because they didn't really believe it was that dangerous. Then you look at just Ingham County, East Lansing, college students who are at least somewhat more responsible than a 5-year-old. I'm not sure how much more, but somewhat more. And we had, 23 fraternities and sororities and 11 houses quarantine because it broke out. So how are we expecting our 5-year-olds, our 6-year-olds, our 7-year-olds, our 8-year-olds to be responsible social distancing kids and have education? I feel like should be on a desk with a mask, almost in a cubicle. And then we got to think about the teachers. Those teachers are doing a fabulous job, and to ask them to take on more risk just so some people can feel good about their kid going back to school does not seem fair. And I know people are going to say, well, the mortality rate is this, the mortality rate is that. But if just one kid dies, will you be okay with that? If just one parent dies because the kid brought it home, are you going to be okay with that? I think one death is one too many. And right now we have something that's working. It might not be the best situation in the world right now, but why don't we get through the year hopefully get a vaccine, and then go on with our lives instead of risking everybody just so we can say we're in school. And then I would like to add, I agree with that one person that if you as a board can't meet in the same room and do the Zoom to us, then how is it realistically fair to say the kids can go to school and the teachers can go to school? I mean, if you're not going to take that risk, why should our kids and our teachers take that risk? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I'm showing a first, well, I don't know if it's first name, a Kelly. If you could introduce yourself, please. Kelly, whoops, you're still muted. There, you should be unmuted.
Okay. Sorry about that. It's a little not used to doing that on a phone. Hi, my name is Kelly Rowe. I have my youngest is a sophomore at the high school. And I just wanted to basically a couple comments. As a recently retired educator, as both a teacher and administrator, I can tell you and everyone listening, this is a nearly impossible situation. Shortly before I retired, I was in the early stages planning in our districts. In Shiawassee County, they are back face-to-face, well, 65% of the kids. So I do have to reiterate, I think everyone is working extremely hard. I can't even imagine the teachers, you know, having the 6 classes and just, I hesitate to even email the teacher because I can't imagine they would even have the time to get back to me. So, you know, all that being said, I am just curious and wondering in moving forward either way. I think we as educators, when we do attempt to put out some communication, it definitely would help to try to come to it from a parent's perspective. I've been guilty of that as an administrator in the past, kind of communicating things that, you know, sound perfectly clear to myself, but then maybe not adding enough detail that will really sometimes help parents in the communication aspect. That being, for instance, I know I've heard a couple parents voice some concern and confusion about the hybrid model. And my assumption to that, the hybrid model is, you know, the reason looking at that, only bringing half the kids back is to very well attempt to keep the numbers, you know, manageable at the face-to-face, not that you're trying to only have the kids back live half the time. So just some simple things like that as far as the communication goes. What I'm hearing and understanding is that the parents in Hazlet are still going to have choice. And I think that's critically important as everyone's expressed their different levels of concern when it comes to the virus. So I think Hazlet is doing an amazing job in still trying to put forth a plan that involves choice for parents and their kids. I am definitely on the side of feeling a greater need to consider the face-to-face for a variety of reasons. But I also understand the concerns. I guess my biggest thing along with the communication is I'm wondering if there is, you know, in many districts, there's board policy for district improvement teams to have all stakeholders involved, parents, teachers, other staff, as well as administration. And being that we, you know, started this way in September, I am wondering what type of formal team has been involved in the planning, specifically the teachers, because really and truthfully, you know, as far as I'm concerned, they need to have the strongest voice in really laying out their pros and cons, what is manageable, what is not. And then especially if they are currently expected or would be expected to do both their daily in-person and trying to manage also some of the online stuff. With the COVID funds that districts received, I'm wondering if there has been, you know, communication put out as far as where those funds are being appropriated, because my understanding was there is some for, you know, additional personnel. And if there were enough teachers that wanted to come back and those that didn't, is there a model that could happen where some of the teachers would be in charge of the online learning and the others could be back to their, you know, what would be normal in-class learning? So I'm just wondering if moving forward, regardless of whether the decision is made today or to come, if there is going to be a formal team that maybe minutes of those meetings could be shared out so that everyone is understanding the whys behind the decisions and not just feeling, you know, that a decision's being made, because I know from experience, there's an extreme amount of thought and process that goes into it. And I feel like that maybe parents just aren't understanding that all that is happening, you know, behind the scenes. So thank you very much for everything everyone is doing. I, you know, selfishly, I'm glad I retired. I also want to give a shout out to our football coaches, because they are doing an amazing job keeping our boys healthy. And I was really in doubt that face-to-face football was going to be successful, and they're doing an amazing job. And I think our kids are doing an amazing job being responsible. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Next, I'm showing Matt Sabo.
Yes, thank you for taking my call here. You know, it's really difficult to talk about a situation like this right now. I know everybody's got different ideas, different opinions. And, you know, my opinion is just my opinion. And, you know, there's a million other people out there that think differently, but it's really difficult to understand where some people come from, where, you know, in-person learning is gonna inhibit their child or get their child sick, when, you know, at the end of the day, I feel like it's their decision to keep their child at home. Living with 4 children in the house and having my significant other run around trying to jump on Zoom call to Zoom call, that's a full-time job. And I know that these teachers are trying their hardest, but at the end of the day, you know, I've lived in many different states. My mom's a teacher, my dad's a college professor, and they're all back to school. Yeah, it's not ideal, but at the end of the day, it's being done across the country. And it seems that this has turned into a political movement where people, it's unfathomable to me right now that we're just at a stage where we're telling parents that they have to keep their kids in school or out of school. I just don't understand why you can't have a video camera in a classroom where teachers can turn it on for the parents that want to keep their kids at home, and for the parents that want to have their kids in school learning can, you know, just send their student to school. I mean, it's done across the country and across the state. And I understand. I don't want to negate somebody's opinion about getting their child sick or you know, what have it. But at the end of the day, it's everybody's decision. And at the end of the day, we can't live in a bubble the rest of our lives. I know that my kids at home are becoming depressed because they're stuck inside looking at a computer every single day. They come out looking like zombies. I have a son who is special needs and autistic and has special needs at school, where he goes in person for math because he struggles in math, and then you get an email from a teacher saying, well, he's struggling in math and he seems uninterested on the Zoom call. Well, am I supposed to have somebody sitting there every minute of the day looking, making sure he's paying attention when there's his toys in the room? You know, you got to think about not just people who have one child, people who have multiple children. And yes, that's our own decision. But at the end of the day, you're affecting a lot of people. And my significant other can't go back to work because she's become a homeschool teacher. It'd be different if she could just teach her own program, but to get emails upon emails from teachers that maybe this student didn't finish their work in this subject and this student didn't finish their work in that subject, you know, it's becoming a teacher of their own, where it'd be a lot easier just to homeschool and have your own program. So, you know, we live in a country where the president allowed school of choice. I mean, if you don't want your child to essentially go to school, then have them go to a different district. I mean, at this point, it's unfathomable, you know. I mean, right across the street, there's tons of places that are allowing students to go to school. So I just, you know, at the end of the day, I want everybody to be safe. But at the end of the day, we have to go back to some kind of normalcy. Thanks for the time.
Thank you very much. Next, I'm showing Sarah Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for letting me talk tonight. I've typed up some things so that I make sure to hit all of my points. So it's going to sound kind of robotic, but I put some thought into it. So I am a second grade teacher at Raleigh, and I know our school has been brought up a couple of times tonight, so I just wanted to give my piece. So I'm coming against hybrid right now, like I was back in August, and I was on the committee then to look at plans and to make things work, whether we be virtual or hybrid. And I will be on the committee again as we start them this week. And I'm honestly surprised that the meetings haven't been continuous since school started, because it feels like now it's just all happening super quick. I have loved getting to know my second grade Hunt Hawks the last 19 days of school. We have been, you know, making connections virtually by doing high fives at the end of every lesson. And while that is not ideal, and yes, I wish that they could be in my classroom as a class family, and that our world could be normal again, it's not going to be anytime soon. I do not want to risk their lives, my life, or our loved ones' lives by bringing them back to school before we are ready to keep them 100% safe. Like others have said, you know, you can't choose who's going to get sick. So in my opinion, we shouldn't have to choose. We should just continue to be virtual. I've been teaching virtually from my classroom to ensure that I can create the best learning resources for my students, and so that my internet doesn't drop out and cause them to wonder where their teacher is. And I'm extremely thankful for that opportunity that I am able to go into my classroom. But while I've also been there to work and to get my classroom ready for when the inevitable happens, I do not feel that it is yet an environment conducive or safe for my students. Anyone that has had a child in my classroom this year or in years past knows that my environment is my top priority. I want my students to feel that they are safe and happy and in a place where they can learn. But with temporary fixes for things like shelves and sinks that have been delayed in construction due to COVID, I do not yet feel it is a safe classroom environment. I'm going to connect back to Mr. Irving about expecting our rooms to stay clean. We have two amazing custodians at Raleigh, but they are currently working super hard to get things clean just after construction. In the 53 days at the start of 2020, I had 5 days off in my classroom. 48 of those days was pre-COVID. And that is with me being super germ focused. I'm sure that my Hunt Hawk families from years past are laughing right now, but I am super germ focused in my classroom, and we clean things and my students know their hand washing expectations. But again, pre-COVID. Are you telling me that that number wouldn't be worse now? I've been disappointed with adults in our work environments and in our local community continuing not to wear masks properly, if at all. So how will students follow those expectations if the adults they look up to at home and around them don't follow those rules? Virtual learning, as other teachers have said, is more work as a teacher than face-to-face. I believe that hand down, and I'm an educational technology master from MSU. I'm not using this fact to complain because I've actually found a groove in the last 4 weeks, but I merely want to express that causing teachers to also add in hybrid and teaching live to 2 sections of students, one in person and one online, is not feasible. Christina Snyder spoke earlier tonight about this, and the live lessons, for those of you that aren't familiar with our schedule, are 20 minutes right now for literacy and for math. And it's hard to have much give and take in those moments. It's a lot of silent agreement or disagreement or silent motions for students to participate, let alone if we're trying to actually interact in person with those students that are in our room and on the screen. Yes, I have a webcam that's fabulous, but that is not going to allow students at home to feel like they're actually in the classroom. And that is what we're trying to accomplish with hybrid, I'm assuming. So even with our awesome new technology, I don't know how we could have it work. I want what's best for students and for teachers and for families. but that's a lot of people. We need to think about what's best for our kiddos and for our teachers that are on the front line there, and not risk our health or at the risk of burning the candle at both ends, as other teachers have talked about. So thank you for your time, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. All right, I don't see any hands raised in the participant block. Mr. Casson, do we have any emails that you've received?
We have not received any emails.
Okay, then it looks like we are ready to close public comment, and we can move on to the superintendent's report. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, President Lemmer. First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge all the parents that spoke tonight. We appreciate input. We've been getting hundreds of emails every day with input and suggestions and feedback, and we just really appreciate all the time and effort that parents have given us in terms of that feedback, and we are listening. So I just wanted to make sure that people understood that first of all. The first order of business on my superintendent's report is a construction update. I know we've heard a lot of comments about the construction. So I wanted to start first of all by answering a question that's been asked several times to me about the decision to go online back in August. August 3rd was the time that we made that decision. That at that time, construction was not the reason that we made the decision to go online. I want to be real clear about that. Since that time, near the end of the completion of construction, did we have challenges? We did. We did have issues with supplies. We had issues with manpower, and it did cause some issues near the end of construction. But that wasn't the reason at the time that we made that decision. I just want to be real clear with the public and our community about that. Second of all, we do have occupancy for our building, as has been mentioned. We do have students that are coming back in the building. We've had our learning labs up and running. We also were able to administer the SAT to over 150 seniors at the high school last week. So we're able to bring students back, and we, at least at this point, have been able to do it in a safe manner. So in addition to temporary occupancy, all of our classrooms are completed. All of our classrooms were completed the first week of school, with the exception of the 4th and 5th grade wings at Murphy, which were completed the second wing. So all our classrooms were ready to go the first week of school. We did have a lot of flooring issues, as I mentioned before. That really caused a domino effect of other issues that didn't get done. But at this point right now, all of our elementary buildings are completed. We do have punch lists, little things that have to be completed at all the buildings. The only issue we have at Murphy is we have their lunchroom floors is in the process of being completed this evening. At Ralia, we have some kitchen equipment needs to be installed, and we do have some moving of equipment back and around, but pretty much our elementary buildings are up and running. All of the sinks that were in each of the classrooms are working now. And so all of the restrooms and everything in our elementary buildings are pretty much 100% done, other than the punch list items, which will be taken care of over the next week or so. At the middle school, we're pretty much completed, other than the lunchroom, the floor there. That really was the last space to be done, as we use it as a staging area for a lot of other things that were going on, but all the classrooms and the majority of the spaces are completed at the middle school. Likewise with the high school, the lunchroom floor at the high school is halfway completed. We've had some ply issues there, but all the instructional wing is completed. All the bathrooms are ready to go. As I mentioned, we had SAT just last week for over 150 students in the high school. The new wing at the high school is still under construction, as I mentioned before. That won't be completed until later in the year, but there's nothing currently in terms of construction that is prohibiting us from bringing students back. And as I mentioned, we already have been doing it in many cases. So that's a construction update. The next item on my report is a return to school learning plan questionnaire. As you've heard this evening, we've had some concerns in terms of the questionnaire itself. We tried to clarify that with the communication that went out on Friday, and I do apologize for any of the concerns or questions that it has raised. The purpose of the survey really was, as we came to the conclusion that hybrid was the only manner in which we could bring students back face-to-face, that we need to reaffirm those numbers in terms of hybrid and 100% online. Understanding that the hybrid method that was explained in the survey was pretty much our summer plan, other than we did talk about the possibility of limiting some asynchronous learning or synchronous learning So we just wanted to be upfront about that, but we tried to leave the out to say that parents would have some additional time, that if they wanted to change their plan after they got more information, that they were allowed to do that. And we have done that with the survey. We've extended the date for the survey to give parents some additional time to make sure that they make the right choice. We didn't want to force anybody into any decision in terms of online or hybrid. I know that that's been one of the concerns that's expressed tonight. That was not our choice. We just needed the information for planning. As we look at coming back on a hybrid method, there's a lot of planning in terms of cohorts, busing, transportation, scheduling of staffing, and of all those things. So we needed to know what numbers we had per building and by grade level. So in order to put the plan together, we wanted to make sure that we had the most accurate data in terms of those parents that wanted to bring their students back in the hybrid face-to-face model. That is the return to school plan questionnaire. And if anyone has any specific questions about the choices and the plans, please feel free to email me directly or to Ms. Gillings, and we'd be happy to answer as many questions as we have. We've been trying to keep up with emails. As I mentioned, we've been getting hundreds of emails with questions, and we're trying to keep up as much as we can. So please, we encourage you to continue to reach out and give us feedback so that we can continue to make it clear to parents before they have to make a final choice. So that concludes my report.
Thanks. Mr. Cook, I just wanted to clarify, I'm not sure if I heard you properly, but you were acknowledging that the hybrid plan that we discussed in the fall is not looking, or it's potentially not going to look the same, and as it was described in the survey was not the same as what we discussed in August. Is that what you're trying to say?
The hybrid plan that we put out in August included synchronized learning and synchronized learning. And so when we got to look at the hybrid plan moving forward, we weren't sure how much of that, and I'm going to explain a little that later in the meeting, but we couldn't figure out exactly how much of that we were going to be able to offer. So we wanted to at least let parents know that there may be some changes in terms of that synchronous learning piece, but we have not made any final decisions, as you'll see when I give my update on the return to school learning plan. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I thought you said that it hadn't changed, but I wanted to clarify that it may be changing.
Correct.
And I think the language in the survey caught people by surprise.
So that concludes my report.
Any questions from board members? I know we'll dive into the details here in just a minute. And don't forget to shout out because I don't necessarily see everybody. All right, and hearing no questions from board members, we will go to our discussion items, which first is the extended COVID-19 learning plan. This is the document that is required by the state of Michigan to basically resubmit everything that we had already submitted. Sorry, I'm showing my bias there a little bit. Mr. Cook or Ms. Gillings, I'm not sure who wants to start.
Yep, I'll start. So, so this document is kind of the second phase of our extended learning plan. The original document that we were asked to submit when it pertained to phase 4, mostly dealt with the issues like hygiene and protocols for in the building. Once students returned, there was no real place in that document for instructional pieces. So this document, I think, is just a follow-up to that original document to kind of clarify some of those pieces. But again, this document will become a working document because every month we are required to do a recertification of this plan, and it can change as things ebb and flow through this process. So Mr. Cook, we will go right to page 5. So we were asked to give an opening statement, and really in the opening statement, it was just to talk about the rationale behind this plan and why and how we were going to deal with pupil engagement and achievement for this school year. So that's just a narrative about our opening statement. So go to page 6, please, Steve. The next section talks about our educational goals. Some of these we talked about at the last board meeting where we had to present our goals ahead of time. There are sections of this plan. So evidence-based assessment practices. In Hazlet, we already use assessment practices that are pretty rigorous for our MTSS program. So we outline in this section of the plan about our benchmark assessments. With the COVID plan, we are expanding our benchmark assessments because we know that students are coming to us from the spring when we didn't have the highest quality instruction that we needed, that there may be learning gaps. So we've already used NWA at the middle school and at some grade levels in the high school. We are expanding that down to our K-5 programs as well to get a little better understanding of where our students are at and the challenges that teachers will need to work on as we work through this year. So this section talks about the use of those benchmark assessments. If you read through this document, it does state in here a couple different times that the state is only requiring us to do a minimum of two benchmark assessments, but we know that best practice is 3 benchmark assessments, and we've always done 3. We do fall, winter, and spring. So we are going to keep up that practice throughout the district. We did write it as a minimum of 2 just in case something were to happen and we weren't able to accomplish that. But that's our goal, is to make sure that we do all 3 assessments, and that will help us with our goal reporting in the winter and in the spring. Our educational goals that we went through at the last board meeting are vague, and they're vague on purpose because the state gave us 9 weeks to do the benchmark assessments, but the goals were due ahead of that 9-week window. So we are finishing up our benchmarks, and we don't want to set goals that are not achievable, even though our administrators are confident that we are still going to be, we're going to have the same type of results that we've gotten in the past. So it talks about how we're going to deal with using not only our benchmark assessments, but using formative assessments and summative assessments in the classroom to work with our students, and also working with our MTSS protocols. We're going to keep those as consistent as possible with interventions for students because we know that they need them. And just as we develop our hybrid plan and as we do our online work, we are taking that into consideration about how to accomplish all of those tasks throughout the year. It also talks in here about our students that are both in our MTSS programs and in our special ed programs, how they are progress monitored throughout the year. We're going to keep up the same pretty rigorous schedule with that, 6 to 8 times a semester, progress monitoring students. And we use Ames Web Plus tool for that in some of our buildings, and we use our Acadience progress monitoring tool in other buildings. So we will continue those practices as normal. Under the instructional, on page 7, Steve, under the instructional delivery and exposure to core content. So we talk in here about how we've started the school year in a fully online format. We talk about the fact that we're using Google Classroom and Seesaw as our platforms, and teachers and support staff to utilize in assisting families and students to learn those platforms. On page 8, we talk about at the middle school and high school using a block format at this point in our program, attending hours 1 through 3 on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then they attend hours 4 through 6 on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at both the middle school and at the high school. And that our DK through 5th grade students are in a more traditional format where we're doing some synchronous and asynchronous learning. We are targeting our reading, writing, and math for synchronous programming, and then we are using asynchronous learning for science, social studies, and our creative arts platform. We talk a little bit about using Zoom and Google Meet for our synchronous instruction. We will be moving over to completely utilize Google Meet within the next couple of weeks, because we know that now that program has some new enhancements on it, that program will play better with the Chromebooks that our students have been issued for one-to-one learning. So we're going to continue with that, with those platforms. And we talk about that teachers are doing daily attendance in Skyward, and attendance is a little more time consuming than it used to be. in the traditional model that teachers have to, if students don't attend synchronous sessions, then there is a protocol about connecting with students, whether it's through the assignments that they turn in or whether it is through phone calls and emails to make sure that they're keeping up with the classroom content in the courses that they're enrolled in. Once it's determined that it's safe to return to school, the district will utilize a hybrid or cohort model. And again, we've put down some of our preliminary thoughts in this plan about having a blue cohort and a gold cohort that will model similar to what we're doing right now, but that's subject to change based on the plans that we're going to develop in the next week and a half that will allow for the best possible programming and hopefully sustain some of that.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
Talking to me to sustain some of the synchronous learning that parents are concerned about losing if we move to a hybrid model. It's also an effort to try to make sure that we can hit as much of the core subject areas as we can at all grade levels. So we're doing some tweaking of our program to see what's going to work best because we basically will have 3 different things going on. We'll have kids that will be attending in person at times and at home at times, and then we have other students that will be fully online. So we want to make it as rigorous and challenging for our students, but also we want to make sure that our staff can sustain the type of program that we develop ongoing so that we can limit the amount of changes that we have to make. So again, I appreciate a lot of the comments that were made, but we have a lot to think about as far as making this work so that staff can execute the plans that we develop. Let's see, we talk about on page 9, we just talk about what those plans could potentially look like in, again, just talking about the synchronous and asynchronous portions of it. Under the curriculum instruction, we are using our current Hazlitt academic standards and curriculum for every course that we're offering. We've added some pieces as far as the technology that we're using to help to execute that curriculum. But again, we're using all of our own teachers and all of our own curriculum, so that in our pacing guides, and so far it seems as though teachers are keeping up a good plan with that to make sure that delivery is consistent with what you would see in a normal school year. We taught on page 10, there is a section on assessment and grading, and again, students are being graded just as they would in the normal classroom. We are still using our same or similar assessments, and I say similar assessments because some of our common assessments have been modified to go to more of a unit approach so that we can keep better tabs on where kids are throughout the school year instead of just doing large assessments at the end of the semester. We're also using formative assessments that give us more actionable feedback as we work through each day to make sure students are staying on they're achieving at the same level that we would expect in a classroom. It is a little more challenging when they're online or if you don't see them every day, but for the most part, teachers are keeping up with that and keeping that consistent with what we would normally expect. Under the equitable access portion of this plan, technology, we did go to 1-to-1 this year so that all students would have Chromebook access both at home and if we return to school. It also helps with the cleaning protocol for devices like that and so forth. We're using those DK through 12 all the way through. And we have established the need in families who need internet access, and we have provided hotspots with appropriate filters on them for our students that need them in their homes. Students with identified special needs, we do have our learning labs up and running this year. Teachers, case providers are working through all the IEPs. We do have some of those IEPs and plans that need to be updated because of last year, keeping them in compliance from last year, this year. So they're working hard on getting that, those updated and making sure that they fit with the program that we're currently using and what we could be potentially using in the future. The learning labs are supplemental in-person instruction to support the virtual learning platform. And again, we have many students that are coming in and taking advantage of those platforms in our learning spaces. The last section of this plan just talks about on page 12 about our other learners, like our second language learners and students that maybe are in our MTSS programs or in separate programs such as early childhood, CTE programs, early middle college, gifted and talented, dual enrollment, all those students. And again, those are pretty much business as usual is what we've done. We always have had a case manager that oversees our English language learners, and she is diligently working with her very large caseload of students to keep them on track and keep them where they need to be. And then we've also made accommodations for students, especially when it comes to Wilson Talent Center, because their schedule doesn't jive very well with ours, but the high school has done a really nice job with helping those students to stay in those programs and adjusting their online classes as needed. So that concludes that part of our learning plan for now. Stay tuned.
Susan, it's Molly. Quick question. So you talked about how the assessment related goals are really generic right now because we had to turn them in before our assessments were done. So are you anticipating when we're looking at this plan again in a month, when we have to recertify it, that the goals will be more specific based on what we saw in our assessments?
We could do that if we need to. The state criteria says that we need to update our goals in January, but yes, we can include some of those pieces as they develop in our plan just to keep people informed. Absolutely.
Thank you. I just want to be clear on what the timeline was for that.
Other questions? So I have a question. I think you sort of answered it, Susan. As I understand it, this is sort of a snapshot. This is our monthly, this is what it looks like now. Next month, you'll incorporate any changes or updates. Because I did have a question about on page 8, the hybrid plan. And again, we're still sorting through what's going to be best for students and teachers to keep, as you said, the rigor for the students, but also the sustainability and avoid burnout for the teachers. So that's sort of the snapshot of what the current plan is now. But next month, as we continue to learn, we continue to get new options, that will change, correct?
Yes, before our next board meeting, I'm pretty confident that we will have a pretty defined plan that we can definitely share, and probably share that out a little sooner than that, hopefully, with parents so they can get a better idea of what that's going to look like.
Great. Kind of on a related note, on page 11, this might be a little bit of wordsmithy, but when talking about the reviewing of IEPs, et cetera, it says will be reviewed, but at this point you have done those reviews. So I might recommend that you say the IEPs were reviewed.
Okay. I can do that.
And there are some abbreviations throughout the document, but since this is sort of a Department of Ed educational document, I guess you're not worried about having to like define what CTE, Career Tech Ed, and some of those other abbreviations. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. And this plan is submitted to the Ingham ISD for their approval. They are actually the ones approving this document, and then it gets forwarded on. And then we will post it on our website once they do that.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from board members? Great, so we will move on to our responsive return to school plan, which is the nitty gritty of what it could look like.
Thank you, President Lemmer.
Thank you.
So I'll try to go through this as slowly as possible. If board members have individual questions as we go through this, please, I know I hate to shout out, but it's hard. I can't see everybody now that I'm doing the presentation. So if you have any questions, just stop me along the way as we go into this. So So I wanted to update the board and the community on where we are with regard to our responsive return plan update. We've heard a lot of opinions and a variety of feedback as to what we should be doing moving forward, but I just wanted to give you where we're at this point. The criteria for return to face-to-face instruction, we talked about that at our last meeting. Really, the My State phase for our region, we're currently in phase 4. That has not changed. If that was to change, that could potentially change where we go with regard to this plan, but everything that we're going to present tonight assumes that we will continue to be in phase 4. If that changes, like I said, we could potentially go back and have to go fully on or stay fully online for a longer period of time. But all of our protocols and everything that are in place are based on that phase 4 status for our region. And then we've talked at length about safety protocols because we're in phase 4. The Michigan Safe Schools Return Roadmap does outline all of those protocols. We pretty much have those all in place. We are in the process of finalizing a document that we will share with the community hopefully this week that will outline all of those protocols, not just what we're going to do in schools, but all of the protocols in terms of if we have a case, how we report it, what's happening along the way if we come back and we do have a case that's reported in our building. We've been working closely with the Ingham County Health Department. They've come out with various documents in terms of guidance on what that looks like. So this document will be sent out and basically will have all those protocols of all the things that we're going to be doing in the buildings if and when we come back. So really
Steve, this is Karen. Yes. With these protocols, just remind me about one of them in particular. One of the protocols that we have to meet is the 6 feet distancing, correct?
That's one of the highly recommended. It's not required.
But we are choosing to meet the required and the highly recommended and recommended as part of our plan.
Correct, and we are going to, as best as we can, honor that 6 feet distancing. I think the social distancing is going to be the biggest challenge in terms of return to school on the buses, in the hallways.
Right, but the 6 feet distancing also greatly impacts our classrooms and how many students we can have back at any given time. Okay, because that plays into what we can and cannot do with our hybrid models and other things. Okay, I just wanted that reminder.
Okay. And Steve, this is Molly. I know there was a question about HIPAA and would we even know if there was a student who tested positive. So I know you said you're putting together a document that includes all those protocols, but I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about like that information exchange between the health department and how that might work.
So the Ingham County Health Department has said that anytime that there's a positive case in our district that they will notify us and let us know that that's happening. They will assist us in terms of the protocol. They've laid that protocol out, but they will assist us in terms of all of the tracing that needs to be done, in terms of quarantine or what we have to do in an individual classroom or building. They will assist us in making those determinations based on their assessment of how that particular individual became positive and what's the likelihood of spread and how that potentially could affect an individual classroom or a building. So we're really, we'll be leaning on the health department in terms of that assistance and making those determinations and how we handle not only within the buildings, but also notifications to parents and to our staff if we have a positive case, how that is to be communicated. As somebody mentioned earlier, the state now has a website that you can Google that shows all of the potential cases in any of the K-12 facilities around the state. So they're required to report that to the website. So you could go on there and look at all of the districts around the state that potentially have had cases reported since the inception of the reporting.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So really, I'll hope to accomplish 2 things today is to talk a little about the hybrid and 100% virtual plan. I know there's been a lot of questions about that. There's really 2 decision points. Obviously, we need to come up with a plan that we feel is viable for all students, and we want to give choice. We want to have both face-to-face and 100% virtual options. But in addition to that, once we have our plan in place, we also have to make the decision, is the COVID data in our region acceptable to make that decision to open? And so I want to focus on that to start with. I know we've talked a little about that in the past. but there are several websites and information sites that we're using to guide us in that decision. The biggest one is the Michigan Start Map, and that has all the data around the state in terms of these two major categories: percentage of positive tests and new cases per million. You're able to get that by region. We're currently in the Lansing region, which includes, I believe, 4 or 5 counties, including Ingham County, but it also allows you to drill down and get that data by county. And so currently, as I looked out onto that website today, we're currently at 5%, and the new cases per million is 107.6. Those numbers have dropped over the last several days. Their numbers are based on a 7-day average. And so we'll be monitoring those particular figures as we move forward and we make the decision potentially to come back face-to-face. In addition to the MyStart map, the Ingham County Health Department has their own COVID-19 dashboard. Their dashboard is actually a little more current in terms of giving that rolling average. They're using a 7-day average also, but they also, the MyStart map is a couple days behind. So if you try to compare the numbers between the Ingham County and the Michigan Start, which shows the Ingham County data, they're not necessarily in sync because of that time delay in terms of the 7-day rolling average and how they report that. On the Ingham County site, if you've been out there, and we went out there last time, but it shows the total number of cases, the cases by zip codes, and it also gives the status of patients, both hospitalized, ICU, recovered, deceased, and at home. It also has a little heat map there that shows by area within Ingham County where the potential risks are by cases and how that's potentially spreading out to the various areas around. Most of that, as you may well know, is MSU related now, and so how is MSU affecting that? We'll talk about that in just a minute. But in addition to the Ingham County Health Department and Michigan MyStart map, the Centers for Disease Control just recently came out with an indicator similar to what the MyStart map has. Theirs is based on a 14-day average. And if you look at our current numbers and you look at their table, the 5% and the cases basically puts us into the low to moderate range of risk. The cases puts us into the higher rate of risk. The state does have similar rate. They have like A, B, and C, which is kind of low, medium, all the way up to highest. So those pretty much line up, the CDC and the Michigan MyStart map. The only difference is the 14-day versus the 7-day rolling average in terms of reporting. And then the big question that I've got from parents is, the MSU effect and what's that potentially having upon our decision to move forward with the decision to come back. This is taken from the Ingham County website. And as you can see, there's been a huge, obviously, spike in cases since the MSU community has come back. This obviously has peaked up here, and that's now started to go down. You'll also see that the percentages have gone up in terms of positivity, almost 6%. That number has now started to go back down. It's at 5% on the 7-day average. It's actually lower than that if you look at the daily cases. So this is how relatively MSU is affecting us in terms of their data. One of the things, and we've had our superintendent's county group has met with Linda Vale on many occasions, and I've had individual Zoom meetings with her, and to really ask that question about the MSU effect. I know a lot of people are concerned about that. And at this point, as you can see, our zip code, which is 48840, we're in the 60 to 70. We're kind of in that lower risk range. However, that could change over time. As you know, we're not just in one zip code. We also share some of those other zip codes in terms of what the numbers are. As you look down here, this is obviously East Lansing. Those numbers are extremely high. So we will continue to look at those numbers and how they're beginning to spread out into the communities. When I last spoke with Linda Vale last week, she said, at least based on the data now, it does not appear that is moving out into the communities. Obviously, East Lansing is a little different story, but if you look at Hazlet, Okemos, and Williamston, some of the surrounding areas, you're not seeing the same number of cases, obviously, spreading out into the community. And as I said, that could change over time. Big Ten's now coming back to football, so we don't know what the football season's going to do in terms of those numbers. But we really want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on what MSU is doing and how those potential cases affect us.
Steve?
Yes.
Steve, yeah, this is Karen again. So I just need to emphasize, and perhaps for people in the community who don't know me, I do have a Master of Public Health, and I do not hold myself out to be an expert epidemiologist, but I know enough to get myself around some of these numbers. So I think, you know, if you look at a lot of the numbers related to MSU, they are moving in a hopeful trend. But I also did some digging around today and some of the numbers that are available from Ingham County and the state. And it is a good another week or so before we can really tell if, in fact, that outbreak has been contained to the MSU community. Because if you look at the Ingham County numbers, after you take out those cases that have been attributed to MSU, the county caseload after this outbreak is still higher than it was before this outbreak. If you look at the week or two before August compared to now, and that's not going to show up on any of these graphs. I was just trying to pull out the numbers and look at them. And it's not incredibly alarming, but it shows a potential trend. So in another week or two, I think we'll know a lot more whether or not truly the MSU outbreak has been contained to their community or if it has spread beyond those borders. But I'm not willing to say right now that it hasn't or it has. We need another week or two to
right,
see
and Karen,
what
this
happens.
is Molly, and again, similar to Karen, I have a public health background and work with local public health. If you look at kind of the state trends overall in that same time frame, we as a state and definitely in this area are kind of creeping back up in our percent positive. So I do think it's important to keep an eye not just on MSU and what's been going on with the outbreak there, but also just in general what the trends are.
Steve, on the previous slide, where 48840 is in the 60 to 70 range. I'm sorry, is this pertinent specifically to the MSU outbreak, or these are countywide numbers like within a specific window of time? Can you repeat or clarify that?
These are total numbers for the county by these zip codes. And
Okay.
so what it's basically showing you is that obviously the 48823 zip code is a huge problem. And then the zip codes, as you move out away from MSU, begin to decrease. And this just shows kind of where we fall in that. If you actually go out to the site, they have a map and they have color coded by areas, Hazlet, Winston, Okemos, and they have those color coded based on these similar numbers that show.
So this is since the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Not
Yes, Tammy.
MSU.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you. That's what I wanted to clarify for everybody.
Yeah, these are absolute numbers, so they're not a rate. And part of the reason why you have like 48912, 10, and 11, those are the areas that got really hard hit early on. And so those numbers are high, although I don't think right now they're getting obviously as much as the East Lansing zip codes.
Thank you.
So this next slide just shows the difference between MSU and the rest of the population. So as you can see, obviously those numbers are affecting our overall numbers within the county. I encourage you to go out to the website. I think they have a lot of good information out there, and it's been very helpful as we've tried to look at this data. So now I want to talk a little about our learning plans moving forward, and specifically talking about the remote learning challenges and what we've learned since the start of the school year. Obviously, we've been looking at these plans over the last 5 months. We've been going up and down and back and forth in terms of what's going to work hybrid, what's going to not work. And so, you know, we've been working on these continuously since this whole thing started. And so we've tried to land on what we think is the best moving forward, but it's changing every day. And I think that the first 4 weeks of school have given us some additional input or feedback in terms of what's working, what's not working. We've also had the luxury of talking with other school districts in the area that are doing similar types of things and what feedback they're getting. And, you know, it varies by district, but I think it's helped us in terms of moving forward and putting a plan together. So one of the messages that we've heard loud and clear, we've heard it tonight, is parents want synchronous instruction during virtual learning. And and so as we put out the survey, we tried to at least tell parents we're not sure what that's going to look like. Unfortunately, that was interpreted as that we were going to get rid of it. That's not our goal moving forward. We want to continue to offer as much synchronous learning as we can, but we know that that's what's going to be a challenge essentially once we go back face to face. So our original hybrid plan incorporated simultaneous synchronous learning, but we know that that may not be possible at all levels moving forward. So we really need to look at that piece, and we really need to know how we can potentially form a plan that's going to work for all students, those who are going face-to-face and those that are 100% online. I do want to acknowledge, as many have mentioned, our teachers have worked extremely hard to make this 100% virtual online. And I've heard a lot of positive feedback from our parents, and they've given a lot of kudos to our teachers. So I just wanted to give a shout out to our teachers, because I know they've been working really, really hard. I've had veteran teachers that come up to me and said, this is the hardest thing I've done in my career. And so we know that they're working extra hard to try to make this work. And that's always been why we're A+. And so I really wanted to make sure that our teachers are acknowledged for all that they're doing. Can we manage the hybrid and virtual? That's the big question in terms of the synchronous learning piece and how we can potentially manage that. So we really have been looking and working really hard over the last several days and weeks to try to figure out how that we can continue that on. What we thought we potentially could do in the summer may not work. And so we want to make sure that we get feedback from our teachers so that we can figure out exactly how we can make this work. And so, as I've mentioned, we've talked to other districts. There are currently 3 districts in our county that are offering face-to-face instructions: Dansville, Stockbridge, and Weberville. And so one of the things that we're hearing from those districts, and not just those districts in our county, even from districts around the state, is that synchronous portion is really the biggest challenge for teachers moving forward in managing those 2 pieces. So that's really one of the things that we have to work out before we come up with.
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
Can you go back one slide real quick?
Sure.
So on the second bullet there, the simultaneous synchronous learning is when we were looking at the possibility that if students went back in a hybrid mode, that the students not in school, not physically in the school at the time, would also be learning live, as well as the 100% virtual students learning live at the same time, correct?
Correct.
All from the same teacher.
Correct.
Which logically sounds pretty difficult to pull off.
Especially at the elementary level too, but it's at all levels.
Okay.
So how can we make these learning plans more successful in terms of for all students? So one of the things that we're looking at is the use of technology and how we can potentially use that to create a simultaneous learning environment. When we went into the bond 2 years ago, we never anticipated that we'd be preparing our classrooms for both in-person and virtual learning. Although, I do believe that we do have a lot of the technology that will allow us to do that. So we really are trying to focus on potentially how can we use the technology to our favor to work this solution. And do we have the technology? I think we do have some pieces of that, and we've made some adjustments since we got into this. We went to the one-to-one. That was a decision that we made because we felt that was going to be better. For our students, we've also added some additional upgrades for some of our learning devices. We all now have webcams in every classroom. We've added some additional pieces when we went to Nearpod, and when we've done some upgrades to try to improve that virtual learning for teachers as we move forward. So, one of the things that we're looking at is, can we modify the schedule to help the problem? One of the things that some districts are doing is creating teachers that are classes that are only taught fully online by teachers, so that can we create certain pockets where at a grade level or wherever that we could potentially continue that on, so that might be a way that we can continue synchronous learning. We're working some of those details out. And part of that is staffing to make sure that we can work out exactly what that's gonna look like. We want to make sure that this plan is successful for all students. So that's really our goal.
Can we circle back to the challenge of the live learning or the synchronous learning simultaneous the in-person instruction? Because I know early on I had this vision of, why couldn't the teacher just be standing up in front of the classroom and they're talking in front of the camera, and so the kids online are getting the information and the students in the classroom are getting the information. And I've since come to learn it's not that easy.
Correct.
So can you talk about that, please? Because I know lots of people have the same question.
So Susan, I don't know if you want to comment a little on that.
Yeah, so we're trying to utilize the current technology that we've put into our classrooms to see if we can do something similar to that. But we are hearing from districts that are currently in a hybrid model that is very, very challenging because you're trying to monitor kids on a screen, and if they're asking questions or if they have questions, that plus the students in your classroom, and trying to make that all blend together and work. Many of the districts that are in that hybrid fashion have pulled back from that model because it's just too taxing on the classroom teacher to try to manage both of those platforms at the same time. In talking to some of our staff that is just currently doing online format, it's even challenging there to try to manage the chat room and kids that have questions and try to keep the lesson going and those types of things. So there's not a perfect answer for that, but we are looking at the technology that we have installed in classrooms on the remodel to see if we can do something that is similar, but we can't guarantee it yet. So I don't want to put out there that we can guarantee live learning in both of those platforms at the same time until we can actually execute that plan. So it is challenging. We're looking at some different models at both the secondary level and at the elementary to try to see if we can make that all work and blend together. But I don't want to guarantee things that we can't come through on.
Nope, understood. I just wanted to articulate some of the challenges that we're both experiencing now and that our colleagues have experienced elsewhere.
Yeah, correct.
Well, Tammy, in addition to that, going forward, as we explain to our students and our families what the hybrid is going to look like, I'd also like to see us explain more about what that classroom environment is going to be like in person, because it is not going to be the same environment that you experienced prior to COVID. So whether or not it's more technology based, having the students have to rely more on their Chromebooks in their interactions than they otherwise would, I think it would also be helpful to address expectations of what it's going to look like and feel like when you're back in the classroom, because I'm a little concerned about the a letdown, a surprise, and unfortunate surprise of what it's going to be like when you're back in if you're back in the classroom compared to a few, in January or February of last year.
Yep, I would agree with that, Karen. Thank you.
So
I agree with,
oh,
sorry, it's Tracy. I was just going to piggyback off what Karen said. And that could be something if we do offer face-to-face instruction, kind of like we did the virtual open houses. The teachers and administrators did such a great job with that, that if there was a way to do that so that to address Karen's concerns or family concerns, this is what it's going to look like, because we haven't really gotten into the buildings. Construction is now finished. We haven't seen the new furniture in place. The teachers are there, but so we kind of see it on Zoom, but maybe an introduction so that the students aren't, surprised, like you said, Karen, as well. Just an idea.
Yeah, Tracy, actually, I was thinking of that too, perhaps using some building specific Zoom meetings as part of the communication strategy,
Yes.
to help with that. And, part of this is just also what I've been learning through my students who are freshmen in college at small schools and what they are experiencing with online and in-person classes. And in fact, they may be able to attend a lecture or a recitation in person, but all of their work is still digital and online. So I just think we need to understand better what it actually means to be in person in the classroom.
And I think understanding that's going to look different for, our younger kids and our older kids. So I think it'll be good to kind of understand how that's going to work at different levels.
Any other questions? So we are putting out a survey to our parents tomorrow to get feedback on virtual learning and how it's gone so far now that we've been into the school year for a few weeks, and we're hopeful that that will give us some feedback in addition to what we've been getting, obviously, at the board meetings, but via email. We want to get some additional feedback from our parents in terms of what that looks like and how we can potentially improve moving forward. And I do want to point out that, and we've kind of all said this, that our final decision, whatever we do, it's not going to be perfect. And so, and realize it's going to be a moving target, that even if we do come back and when we come back, we're going to have to make adjustments along the way. So, you know, we may start with one format and we may think that we can make this work, but as we move forward, we say, wow, you know, we really have to change that. That's the nature of the environment that we're in right now, that it's ever changing. And I know that people want specificity as quickly as they can get it, but it's very difficult as things are changing. We just want to make sure that in the end, we're doing what's best for students. And so we just have to be flexible as we move through this process in terms of making sure that we can be most successful, we can get feedback, and we can make the best decisions moving forward. And so obviously the part of putting all this together is we're going to need a little time to solve this problem, because that's one of the things that we've heard loud and clear. You know, when we got into this, when we started the school, we were kind of in one mindset, and now that we've got into this, the mindset's changed. And I know that there are some people that are saying, well, how come you couldn't have figured this out, you know, 4 weeks ago? Well, every day it's changing. And so, you know, other districts are doing different things, and we're trying to get as much feedback. We want to just make sure that we get it right. We didn't want to rush into it. Plus, we wanted to make sure that teachers could be successful doing virtual. That's one of the things that I've stressed all along the way, that this is new. And so to throw teachers into another environment in addition to what they're doing virtual to start off without giving them time to get really good at that, that's very difficult. And as you heard some teachers, that, you know, they're finally starting to get the hang of this. And so we really don't want to throw too many curveballs in there before we can get all of these things in place in an effort to be successful in the end. That's really what our goal is moving forward.
Hey, Steve, I think
yes.
that point you just made right there is a really important one, giving our teachers the time to learn how to do virtual really well, because even if we switch to a hybrid format, while still obviously offering virtual, the hybrid format still requires virtual learning as well. That's not 100% face-to-face. It's still virtual. And we have to be prepared that if anything does happen, that hybrid has to go back to virtual as well. So I think that's a really important piece right there, is making sure that, you know, the teachers can perform the 100% virtual really well, because it's going to be needed in this entire process.
I agree. And there's so many things that are beyond our control. As Steve mentioned at the beginning, this is all based on us currently being in phase 4. But, you know, case numbers could spike if there's a second wave, like many people are forecasting. Our state could go back to phase 3 or phase 2, which means we all go back to virtual. And that's not our choice. That's how it's laid out by the governor's plan. So I think while we all want consistency for our kids, we have to understand this isn't an environment where consistency is where it could be that we're not consistent about things, and that's not in our control.
Well, and this is Karen again, and I wanted to just use Josh's segue for, you know, a point that I wanted to make. Please, as you're working on the hybrid plans, they need to allow for a pause in hybrid, whether it's a 2 or 3 day pause while the health department does contact tracing on a case in a classroom, or whether it's a 2-week quarantine period. The hybrid model needs to be able to allow that staff and students to be able to move back into the virtual model again. So that just needs to be, unfortunately, part of the hybrid planning needs to be able to allow it to rock back and forth between the two.
Well, and I would argue if and when we do go to a hybrid, the same is probably true. Like, our teachers can't do fully online on Friday, or I'm anticipating maybe they can't. And then Monday, they're suddenly teaching in a new format. So I guess that's a concern that point just made me wonder about. Like, what, in terms of the transition, because we've already heard that the teachers are sort of doing double duty anyway in terms of trying to manage the online plus all the extra online communication and all the follow-up and all the attendance tracking and the double checking, which we all know is important and critical because we've stated that all along, that we need to make sure that our students are not just accounted for in terms of attendance, but that they're okay, that they are staying connected and engaged with their learning. So we're hearing all of that extra work and extra effort that our teachers are doing. But then, you know, there is this preparation of going back to classroom teaching. That's kind of that's a pivot, right? That's the word of the day recently.
Yep.
So are we going to be able to accommodate their time to pivot appropriately and effectively? I don't know if that's a question or a statement, but if anyone has a response, I'm open to it.
I think that has to be part of the plan, Tammy.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, this is Greg. One of the concerns that was raised by during the public comment was the loss of potential face time with the teachers if they select that virtual online. Can you just elaborate a little bit further that you guys are focusing on that to ensure that that is one of the criteria you're looking at here with the models here to make sure that that doesn't happen?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, that's one of our main focuses of why we're kind of revisiting the whole hybrid, is to make sure that we can assure that we can have as much synchronous learning as possible for the online piece, because we've heard that loud and clear, and we want to make sure that we can you know, do that for our students, because that's what we're hearing from parents. And so Susan, I don't know if you want to comment at all on that, but that's, you know, that's our main focus as we get into solving this problem, is how can we manage that piece on the online, either hybrid online or 100% online.
I think my only comment to that is that that is our goal. But again, we're learning this too, and we can't 100% guarantee that it's going to look the same as what it looks right now. So we need people to understand that it might not look the same as what we're doing right now. And we're going to do the best that we can and try to figure this out, but it may need to be adjusted depending on how it goes. That's what other districts are finding out. They start in one format and then they realize it's not sustainable. I think that's the word of the day for me, sustainability. We want to make sure it's sustainable for everyone, because as much as we want to do what's best for kids, which that's always at the forefront of what we do, we have a staff that has to be able to sustain it all. So we got to be mindful of that too as we plan. So
yeah, and I agree with you, Susan. This is Karen again, and I think perhaps one of the ways that we get lost in some of the details sometimes. And I know a couple of people mentioned tonight that, you know, currently with the virtual, we have 4 days out of the week where our students have opportunities for synchronous learning with their teachers. So we talk about a hybrid model, and now we might have some students who are in person, but at best they're going to have the equivalent of maybe 2 days of learning face-to-face with someone. And then you have what we don't know entirely what we can do fully for the fully virtual classroom. But already the hybrid have gone from 4 days of synchronous learning down to perhaps 2 days. So maybe as we look at what we can do for each group, we should start thinking about it in those simple kinds of terms as well, to share with our students and our families the difference, what it will be from what we have now to what we can do, we think, going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Karen.
Yeah.
With that, the one thing we have to consider too is, you know, there is probably a good, I don't know the exact numbers, but we would have a good amount of students right now at 100% virtual who are not learning synchronous as well. They're learning asynchronous because of schedules and other things that are happening, where hybrid might allow them to then get some synchronous learning if the current schedule is not accommodating them.
Okay.
That's just something I was thinking about during that.
Well,
Our
hopefully
students.
that is something we might learn on this next survey of what people's experiences have been.
Yes, that's where I was kind of going with that, is we need to kind of know that information.
And I think it's important, this is Molly, is that while some of our students have 4 days, it's 4 half days. So I know for our students at Wilkshire, they have the morning where it's live and synchronous, and then they have asynchronous activities to do in the afternoon. And even for our secondary, part of their block is synchronous, and then the other part can be asynchronous depending on what the teacher has planned and how they're using that time. So
right.
While it's 4 days, it's not 4 full days for all of our students. So I do think it's like Josh said, there might be some more opportunities for some of our students who currently can't join synchronously to get some in-person time with their students or with their teachers. I just think it's looking at, it's going to affect everybody differently, and it's understanding that the goal is to try to maintain the quality, and it's just it may look a little bit different than what we have right now.
Okay, so here's kind of what we're thinking in terms of moving forward. Obviously, we need some time to plan for this, as I've mentioned before. So really over the next 2 weeks before the next board meeting, here's what our hope is that we can accomplish. We're going to continue to meet with our hybrid work groups to really try to solve this problem in terms of asynchronous versus synchronous, and how we can potentially use technology, staffing, and scheduling to solve some of those problems, as I mentioned. Can we use the technology we have? Can we look at our staffing a little more creatively in terms of how we do that? Do we have a teacher that goes 100% online to help those students who want to stay online? And is that a way of giving more, guaranteed or at least consistent synchronous learning? That could be. And then scheduling, do we stick with the 4 days that we have now, or do we look at some potential options there? And so we're hopefully not going to change this a ton, but we really want to be creative, and our teachers are really, as have been mentioned in public comment, they're really, along with our administrators, the core of that group to help us work through those decisions, because those are the folks who are going to be living this every single day. So we want to make sure that we have their input and that they're helping us drive these decisions. We met with our union leadership today, and we stressed that in our meeting, just to say that, we want to be in collaboration so that we can make this work for everyone involved. So once we come up with that, we would communicate that those final plans to our parents so that they can make the appropriate learning choice. If they decide to change, we would allow that flexibility, and that's hopefully been communicated that that's been the case all along. We don't want to force anybody any decisions. We want to make sure that folks have all the information before they're required to make a final decision. But at some point we do, in order to get everything together. So, once we have that, then we can start to develop our cohort groups. We have a lot of that information from the survey data that we have. So we're really starting to put that together now. If some of those change, we'll obviously make some of those substitutions, but we're working on that right now to put together those groups based on the data that we have. The safety protocols in the hybrid learning plan, obviously, I mentioned that earlier. We have a full document that will be going out this week that will communicate what all those safety protocols are, not only when we're in hybrid learning, but if we have to move out, what happens if we have a positive case, what are the expectations of all of the things that will be required once we bring students back face to face. So we'll have that available for parents to look at moving forward. It'll also talk about masks, the screening process, all of the things that parents are going to have to do if they choose face-to-face instruction, all the things that are going to be required to make that work for us. And then lastly,
this is Tammy. A point I just wanted to make when you're referencing these surveys and collecting of data, I keep hearing members of the community talk about the vote, or the majority of parents want this to happen. Well, I would argue 100% of us wish we could be in person, but the surveys that you've been conducting of parents and families has been, I'll use the term, a snapshot in time. With this situation, in this reality, with this set of facts, what would your preference be today? This is not a vote. This is a data collection. It's a needs assessment. And I think people have misunderstood the purposes of those two data collection opportunities.
It's not your preference for the whole district. It's what would you do for your children? What's your choice for your children? Which I think is different than how sometimes it's been talked about.
Thank you.
So the last bullet point on here is obviously determining the criteria necessary to determine what the acceptable level is. You know, I've shared some of those data sources that we have out there. There is no point in which we're going to be able to say, okay, we've checked all these boxes, now we're good to go. So this is really something that the board and our administrative team have to work out in terms of, you know, as Karen has mentioned, you know, the MSU effect, we've talked about that, but we really don't know how that's going to affect probably for another week or so. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. I'm not an epidemiologist, and not many of us are. So we just want to make sure that we're using the data available to guide us in this process. And these are, as I've shown earlier in my presentation, these are the sources that are going to be helping us guide to that. But there is no, there's no plan that's not going to have some risk involved. And so we want to be very clear with that moving forward. Additional planning, you know, if in fact we decide that there's some technology pieces that we can use that we're not currently using, obviously we want to make sure that teachers know how to use it. So we need some time to be able to do that. And we may need to make sure that they're trained properly on that. As I mentioned, we got to disaggregate the data so we can develop our cohort groups. We need time to do that. Then once we get our cohort groups, we can put our busing plan together. And that does take some time to be able to do that. You know, depending upon how many people are coming back, that could potentially affect our routes and how we move forward with busing. If we modify our schedule at all, we obviously want to make sure that the cleaning protocol can still be maintained as stated in our safety plan. And so if you change your schedule at all, obviously you're going to have to look at cleaning too. How are you going to be able to accomplish cleaning based on those changes? So just some additional pieces to point out of you know, why we're asking for some additional time to make sure that we can have this plan ready and, to go when needed. So in meeting with our plan of schedule at the board meeting on October 12th, we said early on this is where we were going to make at least the next decision point of where we're going. The first and foremost piece would be looking at the data at that time to see if we're at an acceptable level. We want to present our final hybrid plan. That's what we're going to be working on. We want to get that out to parents so that we can make sure that everybody's making a informed decision. I have some dates on here. These aren't dates that I'm recommending. I'm just saying that if they make the vote on the 12th, you know, you got the week after that, you got the week following that, and then you got, you know, November 2nd, 3 weeks out of that time. We believe that the phase-in period is best served by having our younger learners come in first. So we would phase in elementary in the first week, whatever week that was decided, and then we would bring in our secondary after that. And so we just think, as we've talked to other districts, that's been very successful to bring the younger learners in first so we can kind of get a feel for how this works, and then we would bring in secondary after that. So we would propose a 2-week phase-in from the beginning date that the board decides that we can potentially do that. And I would be bringing a recommendation based on the planning that's going to be going into effect over the next several days. And we would also have some further conversations in committees as to where we're at and where we think we potentially could be with regard to these dates. But the idea with that at the October 12th meeting that we would potentially have a vote on when we could potentially move forward with moving to the hybrid method. And you know, I just want to point out it's a very aggressive timeline is trying to get all these things in place. I know that, you know, we're hearing loud and clear that we want to try to get back to face-to-face, but I want to also be realistic, and that's going to take some time for planning. And you know, we've been working with this data all along. We've been looking at different plans all along, and we've been going back and forth based on what we hear every day, every week. And so it's not like that we haven't been working on this. It's just we want to make sure we get it right, and we want to make sure it's best for all students and it's best for our staff too. So that's all I have at this point. I know that's a lot of information. There's a lot of still some decision points that we need to make, but I would entertain any questions that the board might have that I can potentially answer.
Steve, I know you have the COVID protocols and what would happen if there was a case. I'm assuming that part of what would probably happen if kids are coming back in the building is that there would be some sort of screening, you know, asking about different symptoms. And I know a couple people brought up that we're also getting into flu season. So I guess I'm just wondering, have we talked about what happens when a kid has, you know, are we going to require people to test if they're having symptoms to come back, or have we talked about how flu kind of overlaps with some of this, or is that something we haven't even gotten into yet?
Well, we have, but I mean, we're basically following the Ingham County Health Department protocol as to what potentially, you know, you're going to do. You know, they talk about fever and 2 symptoms. You know, just because you have a fever doesn't necessarily mean you're COVID positive. Obviously, we move into flu season. So we'll still have our protocol in terms of flu, that if someone comes to school and their temperatures are certain, you know, rate, that we would send kids home. Obviously, that's what we've done in the past. We would continue on that. If there's additional symptoms on top of that, then we would potentially further pursue the idea of potentially having individuals tested. But that protocol is, you know, for the most part, it's outlined in Ingham County documents that they've kind of given us some guidance, but, you know, it's going to be a work in progress. We're going to have to learn as we go, trying to put this together. And it's not going to be perfect.
Right. And not that flu can't be serious. It's just not what we've been focused on for this year.
Correct.
And Steve, this is Karen. Kind of in addition to that, though, I think the health department is largely going to advise us to refer those cases to their local healthcare provider, as the school's not really going to be in a position to tell somebody they need to go get a test. It's going to be referring them to a healthcare provider. And also with this piece, I know that the teachers are going to be involved in developing the hybrid plans. I'm hoping that we're also getting a lot of input from them on their sense of the experience of teaching virtually, because it was really essential to us that they be given the time to get comfortable in the virtual environment, because it was going to be necessary for a hybrid model. It's going to be necessary when we need to pause in-person learning at some point, which we have to assume is going to happen. But the other thing I'm really concerned about is this whole approach is way more teacher-centric than any normal day in the building. And if a teacher, like Molly says, it gets the flu, or, you know, needs to be out for some other reason, how are we going to replace their absence even for a short period of time? This is just, you know, sometimes we have substitutes with difficulty in a classroom on a normal day. These are not classroom environments that substitutes are going to be able to walk into and be terribly effective. So we have to have that as part of our plan as well. What do we do on those days?
We do still currently have 2 building subs on staff that have been trained, I believe, Susan, on all the protocols. So we do have at least a few individuals that can step in and hopefully manage some of those absences.
So we have 2.
Yeah,
Steve, it's not a few. We have 2. We have 2.
The likelihood of a day that a teacher is out, we would have students in the classroom. Obviously, if we were in hybrid mode, would be the teacher would still upload their work to the Google Classroom, because we're not going to abandon that ship going into hybrid mode. And then the sub would be there more to manage what's on the Google Classroom with the students that are in the classroom for the day. So that's likely what it would look like.
Okay.
So I think that's an interesting point, though. So, I mean, if our teachers fall ill for any particular reason, I mean, I'm just going to use the hypothetical of, if a teacher has the stomach flu, it's going to be very difficult for them to try to upload their lessons and maintain that level of teaching. If anyone has had, I'm just using the stomach flu as a great example of something that takes you down really hard.
Well, luckily we have a really dedicated staff of teachers, and a lot of them are working together so that they can, help each other out in those circumstances. And so, that's one of the options that we have. Some teachers are planned pretty well in advance, so they would have some of that stuff already ready to go and to be able to put it up there. But again, just like a normal year, we would deal with that on a case-by-case basis and figure out how we're going to make it happen, because you don't really have a choice. You got to make it happen. So, but yeah,
just a lot of extra pieces to the puzzle this year.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'll make one more comment. I was letting anyone else step in. I think the two important pieces definitely from Steve's presentation and the different points that we went over here is one, we have to expect compromise and we have to accept compromise. We know going in that not everything is going to be 100% perfect. And so we have to have a little bit of that open mind to know, what we can survive with a little bit here. And I think the end of the point of your presentation, Steve, is a really important one. We're showing what's going to be happening next. Our administrators and teachers and everybody have been working on this constantly. It's not like everyone's sitting around waiting for the next thing to happen. It is a constant process trying to get this ready. But Karen's word of sustainability earlier is one that is the key piece to that. It has to be done in a way that we can sustain this level.
And just to add to that, Josh, it seems apparent that the discussions aren't making it all the way down to the teacher level. And I don't know if in these midnight hour here, as we're getting ramped up to go here, if we're going to change our path a little bit, and as we're getting more concrete plans in place here, that communication is getting to the teachers, or there will be inclusion at this point to get their feedback.
Absolutely. They're involved. They will be involved in making the final decisions in terms of what plans we come up with. Because I mentioned earlier, they're the ones that have to live this day in and day out. So we want to make sure not only do we get their input, but that we, use their feedback wisely.
Well, I think to touch on what Greg just said, though, so Steve, you said they will be involved. Have they been involved?
They have been in the past. So yes, we're bringing them back together to do that.
Okay.
They haven't been over the last couple of weeks.
So as I understand it, like the reference to the hybrid planning committees. So for example, sounds like they have not met recently, in part, I would think, because the focus has been, we're online right now. We need to start the school year. We need to focus on what we're doing. We've not abandoned the hybrid planning. We know and there have obviously been conversations about that. It sounds like the committees have not been meeting as often or at all in this instance. But it sounds like you recognize that it's critical that we continue to have the teacher comments, teacher feedback kind of on an ongoing basis. I think maybe some of the concerns we're hearing is that those committees haven't been meeting, and therefore there's a perception that the teacher voices aren't being heard. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I think maybe we need to create additional opportunities for sharing those teacher voices.
Well, I think part of what's been happening, I think, Tammy, you were right, is we were asking our teachers to take on this whole virtual format. Let's let them teach. Let's let them become more proficient in the virtual model, more comfortable in that delivery. And in the meantime, administrators probably were casting about and looking at what has been happening in anybody that's doing a hybrid, gathering that information and gathering that experience so that they could begin to shape something, because they knew what we talked about in the summer was likely to be different. And now we can begin to go back to our teachers because they've done the work to gather some of that experience, and now they can share that and begin to talk with teachers about how this hybrid model might be adapted? How might it work here, given what has happened and what's been learned elsewhere? Because now perhaps they have a moment of time in their day to be able to focus again on this other delivery method.
Well, and this is Tracy. I appreciate, back on August 3rd, when we made this decision, we said that we were going to reevaluate every 2 weeks. And I feel like we're getting updates on the COVID numbers. We're looking at what is working and surveying parents and teachers about what's working with the online model to make it better, and constantly making the little tweaks and improvements that we need to make. And I think that I want everybody to understand we're going to continue to do that and continue to reevaluate what we're doing. And what I like is the honesty to say, listen, we don't have all the answers. And we are going to have to tweak certain things. And it might not look exactly, 2 weeks from now what it looks like right now. And so if we all can just kind of take a breath with that and just say we're going to keep reevaluating every 2 weeks like we said we were going to do. And so I appreciate that.
Thanks, Tracy. Other comments or questions from board members?
Well, I was just going to offer just one other observation, that in part our board meetings, kind of do reflect a change in this environment. It would be safe for the board members to be present in a room together, but we don't have room to provide safety for all of the people who want to be present in the board meeting to make public comment. And that is one of the rules and guides that we have to function under. If we're going to be in an open meeting, we have to be an open meeting that's available to the public. And so one of the reasons that we forgo what would be safe for us to be in a room together is to be on a Zoom forum so that all the people who want to be present and who want to be able to provide comment can do so. So that's, in part why we need to meet this way during this time. And I imagine probably through the end of the year.
Thank you for pointing that out. The highest number I noted was 283 participants this evening.
Yeah. I don't think we could all even be in the football stadium with us at midfield. I don't know that would be permissible.
That's a great point to follow up on though, Karen. I was thinking about it earlier during public comment as well. But yes, I mean, we can't fit 275 people who want to attend and be a part of this conversation into the boardroom when we normally do this. I'd also add to that this provides a little bit of greater access, that people who may not be able to attend for any particular reason are able to attend these meetings that are very important.
I was trying to flip through the notes. We heard so many great questions and comments. Some of it was not new. It was reiterating people's positions. Some people noted that their positions have changed. Their opinions have changed, in part because the online learning has gone better than they expected it to. Certainly better than what it was this spring. So I'm trying to kind of flip through to see, even though it's not meant to be a dialogue, I want to try to make sure that everybody's questions have been answered. And I feel like in the discussion of both the learning plan and the return to school plan, we have addressed those things. But fellow board members, if there's anything else that you recall from the public comments, and I've been taking copious notes here, just want to create that opportunity if there's anything else that maybe we can address that we haven't yet with the information that we have available.
I can't think of anything. I would just say to Steve and Susan, as they're working on the communications over the next couple of weeks about updates to the plan and the purpose of the survey about how things are going with virtual learning, to just keep some of those questions in mind. So as you're crafting the communications, kind of know that those were some of the questions people already had, and try to answer those questions in how you reach out to parents.
And I would also say that one of the words that we heard over and over again is communication. They really just want to know what's going on and where we are in the planning. And as much, I know we can't give specific details because we're still working on things, but just giving as much information as we possibly can to be transparent. That's all.
Thank you. I agree. That was definitely a theme in the comments this evening. And again, I know you're spending the time doing the work and it takes even more time to then share that out. And I know you've been very concerned about, because as we've seen, you know, rumors get out there, or a little piece of misinformation, or even information that gets misunderstood, then gets spread as fact. And so I know you're being extremely cautious, and you don't want to put something out and have people think that that's the plan or that we've landed on a decision. But I think and we've said this before, in the absence of information, people fill in that void. So we need to, I think, try to do what we can to provide the information that we do have, even if it's just, we haven't decided, but these are still the things being considered.
Well,
go ahead.
I would also ask for people's patience and a bit of flexibility as well, because this environment changes very quickly. And when we do go back in person and we do have circumstances that require us to pause, the communication is going to be even more difficult, because whatever occurs may only affect a single classroom. It may affect a couple of classrooms. Maybe it affects the building. You know, it's going to be very complicated, and people are going to have to be patient, and we'll have to have a lot more public conversation about what it is that our administrators can communicate when we have a case and what they can't. So I have a deep level of trust and confidence in our administrators as they work through this. And communications are extremely hard, and we're asking them to do a little bit more, and I know they will. And we just need to give them some space to be able to do the 36 hours of work that they're doing in a 24-hour day.
Thank you for that, Karen. We appreciate that. Anything else? Has every board member spoken who wants to? Okay, I think we can move on to board reports. Policy and personnel, would you like to give a little update of your last meeting, please?
Sure. So we met last Wednesday morning. It was a really full agenda. We were fortunate to get to meet our new Director of Special Education, Mr. Polosek, who came and gave us an update on what was going on with the learning labs and his timeline for reevaluating those as we move forward. So it was good to be able to ask him a few questions. We also talked about the extended COVID learning plan, which Associate Superintendent Jillian shared earlier tonight, and where we were with the responsive return to school update and the kind of the different variables under consideration, and a lot of what we've talked about tonight, what we had learned from other districts and what we were hearing, of course, from parents, and trying to sort through all the health data and how to balance all of that. We also talked about the policy updates that were recommended from Neola that we had received a week or so before, and are working through getting those available for all board members to review, and we'll be looking at a first reading soon, as well as just what being very clear and creating really a step-by-step process of policy updates, both through Neola and then those that are recommended from the community. So I asked the committee members to review the procedure, the policy, process document, and send me feedback so that I can incorporate that and then share it with the larger board. We had an update on the renovations in the district buildings. And I believe that was it.
Thank you very much. Any questions for policy and personnel? All right, we'll move on to finance and facilities update, please.
We had a similar agenda. We also got to meet Jim Polisek, and in part that was a follow-up to our last board meeting and some questions that were raised about special needs in the learning lab. So Jim came in and introduced himself and talked about all the planning and all that they were doing, and we really appreciated that. Jim has a breadth and depth of experience in special education that I think will be very valuable to us. I'm not sure we can throw anything at him new, but we'll try. We also had quite a bit of discussion with Susan Gillings about the extended COVID-19 learning plan, and also the responsive return to school update and the planning that was going on with how to do a hybrid model, the safety protocols and the timeline and all, and how to effectuate this, and the very creative thinking that our administrative team is doing to try to make this successful for each and every student in the district. We talked a bit about the COVID-19 data that would be available to us, but our discussions on the other topics were so deep that we were very cursory in our review of some of the COVID-19 data and the bond update going forward. We had a lot of discussion. We didn't get to a couple of things, I think, that might have been on the agenda, but.
Great, thank you. Any questions? All right, update on Hazlet Voice for Change efforts. Susan.
So we are, I'll be meeting with some of the reps from that group this Thursday just to go over the survey that they had done that we would like to give to our students at some point this year. And then I've also been working with Dr. Flanow to finish up the survey that we'd like to put out again. But again, we've been inundated with surveys. So Dr. Flanow and I are rethinking about when we would like to send those out so that we can get the information that we are seeking, but not do it over top of another survey that we're doing for our extended learning plan. So it's just a creative shuffle of some things that we need to get done and keep that plan are definitely on the forefront of what we're doing this year. So that's all I have for tonight.
Great, thank you. And the curriculum the curriculum policy change is still one that's being discussed amidst the other Neola updates.
Correct. Yeah, we've received feedback from a couple of representatives from the Hazlet Voices for Change. And so trying to incorporate those given the concern that was expressed by a couple of board members about really what wording we put where given the purpose of some of the language in that policy to address statute. So we've got a revised draft that I will be sending to the representatives from Hazlet Voices for Change here in the next couple of days just to get their feedback and see if it accurately reflects what some of their goals were for those proposed changes.
Great. Any questions for Susan or Molly?
Yeah, just on that last comment there, Molly, that revised draft gets reviewed by the board first.
So I wanted to get the feedback from the representatives from Hazlet Voices for Change just to make sure that what the newest draft was kind of accurately captures what their goals were. And then it will be shared with all of the board members for their review and comment.
Okay.
Great. So we are on items from board members. I think most of us have had pretty lively conversation throughout the evening, but anything specific that any of us want to address or share?
I just want to congratulate the staff and everybody at Wilkshire. Last Thursday was the pickup for the next packet of worksheets and materials for all of the students. So developmental kindergarten, and first grade. And I just wanted to congratulate them. As far as I know, it went fairly successfully. And they happened to do it on the same night that there were soccer practices going on the field across the street. So I'm sure that the traffic at times was a little bit scary, but I just wanted to thank them for all their effort into getting that done and making sure our students have the materials they need to be able to interact in this online environment and still do some of those fun activities.
Great, thank you. Greg, it sounded like you wanted to share?
Yeah, I was wondering, I know in the past, and I've gone online here to see if there was any information on our election, our candidates here coming up here for the board, and if their school district ever does anything like a Meet the Candidates publication. There seems to be something out here online on this Vote 411 voter guide that has some information on the candidates. But I don't, is that something that the board or as a
It's
district we can
generally
put out?
something that the Foundation for Schools has done in the past. Sometimes they will either host a candidate forum or they'll put together a questionnaire, questions for the candidates.
Okay.
It's not something the board has ever gotten involved with in any capacity.
Okay, I think I stepped over top of you when you were talking there. You're saying that's the foundation, the Haslet Foundation does that?
Correct.
Okay.
The Foundation for Schools
Okay.
has typically, and when Steve and I met with them, with representatives them a couple of weeks ago, it sounded like they were going to try to pursue something, but they had not formulated what that was going to look like yet. And to that point, we do have one partial term position. It's Josh's seat, and he is currently the only person running for that seat. And we have Karen's seat, which will be vacated. She's decided not to run again. And we have Tracy's seat that is coming to the end of her term. And there are total of 3 candidates for those 2 positions. Anybody else?
I was just going to say, if there is any sort of a forum for that, or if anybody organizes something like that, it would ultimately be virtual, right? I mean, in the past, it was a big number of people in a room. So I think that's part of why, Greg, you know, nothing's been initiated with everything going on.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Tammy. You got the background on it. So
Just to, yeah, I mean, based on the conversation, if they were to do a forum, it would be virtual. That was the sense I got. The question is, are they going to do a forum, or are they just going to do something more like printed materials? Yeah. Or even electronic, because they do some communications. They have a newsletter. They do mailings.
Okay.
But we will certainly, I mean, as we hear of anything, or administrators hear of anything, we'll certainly share that with the community.
Thanks.
Anybody else? I think I'll just reiterate Karen's point about thanking the community for their patience. We know no one thinks this is easy. I appreciate the people who have acknowledged that this is not an easy situation or an easy decision. We've said all along as a board that we're being very deliberate and trying to keep this as fact-based as possible in terms of our next steps and the decisions that we make. And so we are not rushing to make a decision just for the sake of making a decision. We're not rushing to a decision because District A went in person or because District B is choosing not to go in person. We're continuing to use the information that's available to us, countywide data, district-specific data, information and lessons learned from our colleagues around us, and our own staff and faculty. So we appreciate the understanding and the patience of our community in recognizing that we're being very intentional about these decisions. Going once, going twice. All right, we can move into our consent agenda. I will walk through. We have 4 items on the consent agenda this evening. If anyone needs anything pulled for further discussion or consideration, please let me know. Item number 1 is the approval of minutes from the September 14th, 2020 regular board meeting. Item number 2 is approval of minutes from the September 23rd, 2020 Policy and Personnel Committee meeting. Item number 3, approval of minutes from the September 23rd, 2020 Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. And item number 4, the recommendation to purchase Chromebooks and Chrome management licenses, as was discussed and proposed by Director of Technology Casson at our last meeting, with the recommended action of approving the purchase of 450 HP 11 touchscreen Chromebooks and licenses for Wilkshire. Anyone need anything pulled? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of this evening's consent agenda.
Tammy, this is Karen. I move approval of the consent agenda.
Motion by East. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second by Maury. Thank you. All in favor, let me do a roll call just to get it on the record. Vice President Polverento.
Yes.
Treasurer East.
Yes.
Trustee Mashad.
Yes.
Trustee Collins.
Yes.
Trustee Maury.
Yes.
Secretary Wheeler.
Yes.
And Lemmer votes yes. So the consent agenda passes. We will go to announcements. We do have a Finance and Facilities Committee meeting scheduled for October 6th at 9 a.m. That will be an in-person meeting at the admin building. Excuse me. Policy and Personnel Committee meeting has been scheduled for October 8th at 9 a.m. also in the boardroom of the administration building. The next regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting will be held in 2 weeks on October 12th, 2020 at 7 p.m. This meeting, again, as we've just discussed, will be held remotely because we cannot manage the crowd and the interest from the community in person. Finally, just a reminder for board members, the MASB 2020 Delegate Assembly is scheduled for Thursday, November 5th. As we've mentioned, we don't need to designate an official voting delegate this year as there will be no online voting, but the assembly is open to all. So if anyone from the board wants to participate in that, please let Michelle know and she'll get us registered. We've come to the end of our agenda, so I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Tammy, this is Molly. I move we adjourn.
Motion by Polverento. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That was Cammie Wheeler. Thank you. All in favor? I don't think we need a roll call for this. Please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Well, weekend, month, 2 weeks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.